Madam Mayor, it is 6:06 and we are live.
All right, thank you. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular city commission meeting at Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Betty Resch.
Here.
Madam Mayor, it is 6:06 and we are live. Oh, sorry.
All right, thank you. And good evening, everybody. And welcome to the
Sorry, Mayor Betty Resch,
here.
Vice Mayor Herman Robinson,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioners Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here. Thank you. The invocation will be led by Commissioner Stokes.
We need to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and the future and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. The importance of this responsibility grows more apparent each day as people seek to rewrite history and use education to divide our community. So as trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations today. May we act wisely and well.
Thank you. Thank you. And now we have the pledge by Herman Robinson.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, or reordering?
I do not have any, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Herman, did you want to say something? You're late.
I think that under the circumstances of what's happening with staff and commission, that I would consider an emergency item to set a policy for residential rental from the city. If we're going to go down a path of restoration of reoccupy, I think we should have a policy and a vote to establish a policy to be landlords.
Well, I think maybe next meeting. I don't think that's an emergency.
Well, how much time, more time and money are we going to spend before we establish a policy?
Well, I don't think we can do it tonight. None of us know anything about this.
Can we? Well, we do know that we're spending time and money on.
But what I'm saying is there's nothing on the agenda. We've been really clear about emergencies. I don't see this as an emergency. I think we can possibly, Madam Clerk, do we have room on the next meeting to discuss it?
Well, the question is, are we going to spend any more time and money between now and next meeting?
What's going to happen between now and next meeting? There's no, Herman, I don't understand.
Well, what's missing is a policy to go down this path of even considering occupying buildings to rent residentially.
And I think number one, I know you're talking about L&M, and that's only as a temporary thing that I had suggested that, but I do think that that's not on the agenda for tonight. And I really don't think I get a consensus from the group that tonight would be the time to.
I'm not prepared.
I'm not prepared for that
right now. I really no backup for anything.
Yeah, we have a lot of discussions tonight, which are fine, but we're gonna have a joint meeting with the CRA. I listened to part of the CRA meeting earlier today, and that came up as in their meeting, and that's certainly something that we can all discuss. But I don't see it happening tonight. So I would ask that you, and that's Commissioner Boyd.
I agree that there is no backup. I'm not sure that it's immediately urgent. Would it be a compromise position to say, can we add that as a discussion item to figure out, well, what might this policy include? Is that reasonable?
We've been really, tonight we're going, one of the things we're looking at is protocol and procedure. And it's really clear, and we're pretty strong. We've been pretty strong about not bringing things up at the last minute. You certainly understand that. So I don't know why, not between now and the 15th of February, I don't think any money, Ms. Davis, can we just assure that nothing's going to be spent between now and then? I don't think anything's on the board to do anything right now.
Yeah, there's no plan to spend any money between now and then.
Right. So if we can put this on as a discussion item for the 15th, do we have consensus to do that?
Certainly.
Or do we want to wait for the CRA? Well, we can talk amongst ourselves then, because we're going to be talking about it at the CRA meeting as well. That's fine. So the 15th?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so, Madam Clerk, are there any additions, deletions, or reordering?
We have a.
I'm sorry, Sarah.
I just, that was for the additions, deletions.
Yeah.
I was gonna request if we can possibly move the city manager report to the top of the agenda or reorder it. So we can hear from the city manager, so the audience and the people who are listening can hear her report. It's got imperative information.
Early on, about the legislation.
Earlier, yes, ma'am.
I have no problem with that. Any motion to,
Motion to move her to the top.
Second,
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, what will that become now?
Well, you would have to decide when you want to do it. Would you want to do it after, maybe after commission liaison reports and the public
Yeah.
participation?
Sure,
We could move it after there.
that makes sense.
All right.
It's on the agenda.
Perfect.
Okay, so that's going to be the city manager's report. And that is about the upcoming legislation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so do we have a motion? Do we have a second? Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Okay, so next is presentations. And
Yes, ma'am.
Juan Ruiz, are you in the room?
Well, he-
I'm practicing.
He's hiding.
Come on up.
He's blending in with the.
He's blending in, he's trying to be.
His shirt, man.
As most of you know, when the four of us got elected last year, there was a big change in the city, and then there was a change in city management. And there was a long time, many, many months, that Juan stepped in and ushered us through and got us through the next few months really beautifully. And we planned on giving this to him on 7th of December. But that COVID, that Christmas, that everything else, but this is the first time you're in person, and it's so good to see you back in person. So tonight's the night you get our great thanks. So this is presented to Juan Ruiz in appreciation for your commitment to the city of Lake Worth during your time as interim city manager, presented on this first day of February 2022.
Can I go and get the other 400 employees?
Well,
Really a team effort.
that's the thing, and that's what I have learned in my short time here as mayor, is the level of commitment that our staff has. The level of commitment that our staff has, the leadership that Juan gave us. He proved how adaptable he could be, putting up with a whole new people, go, why can't we do that? So I give this to you with all of our thanks, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. No, I'll just say something really quick, if you don't mind.
Please.
It's an honor. It was an honor and a privilege that the city entrusted me, during that period. And
we trust you
having
before.
5 of you brand new in office was definitely, a fun ride and a challenge. But again, it was the epitome of teamwork. And this organization is backed by 400 employees that are committed every day, all the time, to just try to push the city forward. So thank you for entrusting me during that period of time. And now with Carmen here, we just keep rocking and rolling forward.
I know, it's exciting.
We still trust you.
Exciting time. I noticed that Carmen is keeping him pretty close. His new office is right in City Hall, so he's a scream away.
I'm not far. I can be found.
We can be found. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are at the presentation. We have an anti-racism proclamation that Commissioner Maliga is going to read tonight.
Yes, ma'am. This is being brought forward by the Lake Worth Beach Interfaith Network, which there are a lot of members in the audience today to receive the proclamation. Unfortunately, somehow the proclamation didn't get printed. I think that was because it was on one agenda and then got moved to this agenda. So I apologize for that. So with further ado, whereas the city of Lake Worth Beach is a rich ethnic, and a racial community that prides itself on its diverse population. And whereas the founding charter of the city and the supporting statutes through 1960s provided for legal discrimination uniquely between white and colored residents. And whereas the city now wishes to move forward by providing equal protection under the law in harmony with the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And whereas there's an ongoing need to overcome legacy of racial discrimination by positive action to educate its citizens and provide equal opportunity for all. And whereas the Lake Worth MLK Committee, the Lake Worth Interfaith Network, and numerous other community organizations have come together to organize 28 days of anti-racism campaign during February 2022 to educate the public about the local history of Black anti-racism and the remedial measures that have been taken to overcome historic discrimination. And whereas the 28-day campaign includes a calendar of inspirational quotes, videos, sites, visits, church visits, a bike tour, support for minority-owned businesses, a multicultural potluck dinner, concerts, and other events aimed at education and fellowship across racial lines. And whereas details and information about the emerging events can be found online at facebook.com/LWIN diversity and lwinterfaith.net. And whereas the city of Lake Worth Beach supports these positive steps by providing publicity, venues, and logistical support. And whereas the city of Lake Worth Beach aims to continue to build what Dr. Martin Luther King called the beloved community, where its residents live, mate in spirit of sisterhood and of brotherhood. Now, therefore, she, Betty Rush, the mayor of the city of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, by virtue of the authority vested in her, do I hereby acknowledge February 2022 as Anti-Racism Month, and ask that every racial, religion, and ethnic group in Palm Beach County to join Lake Worth Beach residents in their celebration of diversity of our community. In witness whereof, she has set her hand and caused the seal of the city of Lake Worth Beach to be affixed this first day of February 2022.
Thank you.
There's some members of the community here that I think would like a picture.
Absolutely.
Mr. Ted, and anybody else, Carmel,
Yeah, everybody.
Carla.
Steve, everybody.
Ted, here's your phone. Will
Okay.
you email that to me so we can have it printed and signed?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I haven't seen you for a long time. How are you doing? I see you on Facebook.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Let's get in touch. Let's have coffee again. I can find 20 minutes. That's the challenge.
Mr. Mark from the Lake Worth Herald is here, so everybody come on up,
It is, but I love.
represent.
Remember we met?
Come around the front of the dais.
Hey, I'm Sunina.
Come on, Carla, you know how this works.
Carla, don't go in the back. You're the short one. You have to go in the front. Come on.
Yeah, should we stand? Kim?
Ted?
Carmen,
We take that.
come with us.
Yes, please do.
Carla, you might need to be in the back.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to read over this thing here.
Oh, good luck.
Ready?
Mhm.
Okay, Mr. Mark, you ready?
Get a couple here. All right,
For sure, red, so she'll stand out.
the last one we'll make sure everybody's eyes are.
Thank you.
One, two, three.
He's done this before.
He's done herding
Thank you,
cats.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do, really.
Yes. Oh, that's in my agenda. Yes, oh, yeah, in my pre.
All right. So now we have commission liaison reports and comments. And tonight, let's start with Vice Mayor Robinson.
Well, I look forward to a productive meeting tonight. I look forward to the Bryant Park art unveiling. I look forward to growth and success of Lake Worth Beach. That's it for me.
Thank you. Commissioner Stokes.
Yep, I just wanted to just give a brief update on our education task force. We're getting excited about building relationships with the schools and really focusing this year on letting the principals know that we're here to help because they have so much on their plates and we're not trying to be one more thing that they have to navigate. And we did have a success recently. I think everybody got the report from PBSO that one of our task force members for Barton Elementary actually was talking to the principal and that's how he found out that they needed the food snacks on their Saturday tutoring sessions. And then he on his own went out and made that happen. So we're just really excited to get the community connecting with our schools a little bit better there. I do want to, in the spirit of anti-racism, I do want to acknowledge that when we talk about anti-racism, I feel like we're really being called to action, to not just accept the fact that we are not racist, but to fight actively against systems of oppression that are still existing today. And everyone knows that education is a huge passion and interest of mine, and that is where the fight is right now. It's happening at our school boards.
Yeah.
And I want to call everybody to action that is dedicated to becoming an anti-racist, to follow what's going on in our local elections and make sure that we are electing people to school board that are going to fight for equity and honest truth-telling in our history in our classrooms. So that is the call to action I think I would like to beg of the community. We have to get together and we have to make sure that our schools are safe for all our children.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Commissioner McCoy.
I couldn't agree more with that sentiment that I feel like the whole country is under siege with movements in this state is unfortunately leading in the movements that suggest that education should just be what people are comfortable with. And I think anybody who has read any history would realize that that is a really, really dangerous idea. There are many things that have happened in any country's past, but particularly this one's that we need to know about going forward. And I hope we will all be active in speaking for that. On different topics, I'm very conscious also of development pressure on Lake Worth and South Florida in general. We see that from the movement from the Northeast, pushing various, pulling either way, folks moving this area, home prices and rents going way up. That will only, in my mind, increase the pressure to develop within Lake Worth. And I just want to call our attention as a commission and for the public that the way that zoning and control of development works is if a person has property and has zoning in place, that is what they can do. And it may be that all of the neighbors come to a meeting and are unhappy with the commission, you have to stop this. It's not possible. The place that we as a commission have influence is setting that zoning in front of what do we want our city to be, what do we want our city to be in what place. We have to do that up front. Once it's in place, you don't have any control over it. So it's something that I hope we've talked about it before. We have not yet done a lot on it, but I hope we will. And finally, tomorrow, there is a small ceremony at the Cultural Plaza at 5 p.m. A person named Ernest Hawkins was a soldier in World War II. He died or was killed in he came from 426 North H Street, which I'm sure we all could find. He was killed in action during World War II in Europe tomorrow, February 2nd. So what is it, 60 years ago? No, more than that. Or 22, so 8.
You're not asking me to do math.
Commissioner Stokes.
Yeah, Commissioner Stokes, that's the one.
Anyhow, a while ago, but there is an organization led, I believe, by Conrad Ogletree, Veterans and Homefront Voices, that seeks to, again, history, help us remember things that have gone in the past. My mother grew up during World War II in an occupied country, and was very aware. I grew up with lots of stories of what that was like. So I would encourage anyone who has a few moments, 5 p.m. tomorrow at the Cultural Plaza, to honor one of our own residents who lost his life in the war. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Maliga.
Thank you. It's been a busy couple of weeks since we were all together for the Martin Luther King celebration of life. I attended the Bryant Park Neighborhood Association, Royal Point Siena, and a meeting with Murray Hills residents that was really well attended. I'm like 70 people between the satellite feed that they had for me to be able to zoom in from home. It was so busy, they had people outside on their patio, and they had them all spaced out 6 feet apart. And I was just astonished at the outreach that they had there. So I was very happy to see that. And a lot of those residents are snowbirds, right? So they were happy to have some city input. Both water and sewer and public works were there in person to answer questions that they had. So that was a good meeting. Commissioner Robinson mentioned on this Saturday from 9 to 11 at Bryant Park, we are having an intercoastal cleanup with an unveiling of an art project that is partnered with Healthier Lake Worth Beach, SWA, and the city of Lake Worth Beach. Wednesday, tomorrow, is going to be a very important conversation at the Osborne Community Center from 5 to 7. The residents that surround these cemeteries have asked to have a conversation in regards to what we can do to make the cemeteries look better, feel better, be more secure. What does it mean if we could get someone to come in and take over the lease or lease it from us, buy it from us? What does it entail? How do we just give their families a better level of service? So that conversation is happening at the Osborne Community Center. I did slide flyers under all of your doors. And I know that you guys received the email. Because of sunshine, we can't all talk amongst ourselves, but we can at least listen to what the residents say. I'm also happy to see that there was a first water refill station and put in at Sunset Ridge Park. So we have 5 more of those coming in. So everybody will have access to clean drinking water. So we'll have 5 stations coming in throughout the city. And everybody, the mail-in ballots came in yesterday. Vote by mail ballots are in the mailbox. So please make sure you fill those out. Lots of important questions in regards to our charter.
Thank you. Okay, I have a few things. We haven't met for a while. It feels like it's been a while. I had the opportunity to go to the National Conference of Mayors up in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago. I spent a few days up in a hotel because it was really difficult to leave the hotel. Very interesting, amazing speakers. We had the Department, the Secretary of Labor, Transportation, Homeland Security. Nancy Pelosi spoke, and the president finally came and addressed us. It was amazing to talk to other mayors, because I learned from being there that there is sort of a difference between mayor, commissioner. It was just nice to get together and talk. But I believe that I've said this to the commissioners in our agenda. I think if we go to something, to a conference, we need to bring like a little report back. I'm working on that to present to the council. One of the things, the messages was that we've got money from the feds that we want to give to cities. So I'm working to try to distill that. Where do we get that money and how do we ask for it? I also had just a few days ago, I had the great honor of going to Highland Elementary for the ribbon cutting of the Ben Carson reading room up at Highland Elementary. I didn't know what to expect. And when I got there, it started out in the all-purpose room and the choir sang the most beautiful song and the band played the most beautiful music. And when there were speeches, I was just honored to be able to welcome everybody. And then we went to the reading room and Mrs. Carson was there, lovely woman. And the reading rooms and the Carson Foundation has done this in many, many schools, and they want to do this in every school in Palm Beach County. It's a room that the school dedicates, and they had an artist come in and do murals on the wall, and it's little tiny rocking chairs and little tiny bean bags and little tiny, it was the cutest thing. I felt like a giant, little tiny bookshelves with books in Spanish. It was wonderful. And then they let the kids in and the kids were just like amazed, and they just opened books and started reading. And one thing we are a reading city, and it was great. Let's see a few things. Talking about racism and, education. I mean, today when you see what happened in Orlando a few days ago with the things that were said. I don't want to repeat them because they're so hellacious, but there was a racist group up in Orlando the other day that hung signs from, on the Turnpike or 90 with some highway, and it was frightening and chilling. And if we don't stand up, education is the key. If we don't stand up to this, then it's not looking, it's very discouraging. I met with Carmen and I met with the school board. The flea market is a beloved tradition in our city at the Lake Worth High School. And a few years ago, it was moved out of, it was always under 95, so it was protected, it was shady, and something happened a few years ago that moved it. So we're working on bringing it back under the highway so that it makes much more sense. They don't have to put up, so we're working on that. I want to, once again, I want to bring up, I brought it up before, the 13-acre park the 13 acres up in the northwest corner that I really want to see us as a park rather than change the zoning to single family. It's one of the last open spaces we have. And I would like to get consensus either here or next meeting, however we figure that out, to instruct staff to go forward with what we need to do to make that happen. Because it's a unique, if you've never been up there, my friend Carlin knows well, up at the end of Vernon Street, there's this, I went up there with a few people, there's places for parking. We're talking about just like clearing the undergrowth and putting boardwalks through, not an active park, a passive park, and finding money. It's on the canal. So find money to dredge the canal, get some docks and make it a useful place that we can bring our canoes and our stuff and use the water. So I would like to ask, do I have consensus? Do we all think that's a good idea? To have a park?
Is there a possibility of compromise with that proposed idea
Compromise how?
to have some as it is intended now with the zoning plus a designated park?
Well, it's zoned public now. It is zoned public now with the future land use of single family. So I'd like to.
And well, I've been up to the property years ago, and
Right.
I've always wondered why we aren't using that property better. And I like your idea of using the waterfront. It's another underperforming asset that we have. But there's also, I don't think we're going to get any huge development up there, but we will get a tax base if we consider the development of some of the property up there for improved housing. That's all.
And that's the balance that we have to make all the time is, unfortunately, our city was formed a long time ago and we really have very few undeveloped places, and that's just so perfect on the water. Commissioner Stokes?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of creating parks and nice public spaces. I'm a little worried about rushing too much to a major financial commitment because we have a lot of needs in the city, and I don't want to commit anything to this particular project right now.
I'm not, okay, and I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for consensus not to go for, so that someone doesn't come in there and go, oh, wait, here's 13 acres I could develop with single family houses. Let people know that may not happen. And we obviously would have to find funding someplace. And I think, different Florida Inland Navigation, find that group. I'm sure there's groups that, I'm not suggesting that we take general funding. And I see our attorney has.
Hold on, friend.
Yes, Madam Mayor, one comment on that. I do believe, and I'll have to research it and I can let you all know. I believe there is a deed restriction on that property that has to remain as a park. So I will follow up with you because I believe we looked at that a couple of years ago to see if we could move forward with rezoning it. And there's a deed restriction because that property came down from the state of Florida.
Okay, well, that would certainly solve the
So I
question.
will follow up and email everybody so we're all on the same page with that.
Great, thank you. One more quick thing is that, tomorrow I'm going to be doing the Pledge of Allegiance at the Veterans Memorial, and then hopefully getting down to the Osborne community after that. And I'm setting up a meeting with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. There's a new Haitian group that has formed. The Bangladesh community that we have, and we're trying to get all of our, as we talk about, all of our voices. So I'm trying to set up a meeting with those different leaders to talk and just get in City Hall and say, one thing that I hear constantly from groups, neighborhood groups and different groups is there's no place to meet. We have no available place to give them a meeting place. There's no place to sit and set up their stuff. So And we don't have it. I mean, that's just the fact of life, but it's hopefully some point we will. So we just wanted to start talking to each other. So that's all I have. Thank you. Okay, now we are, yes, Ms. Davis.
Madam Mayor. I wanted to give the commission an update on our lobbyists, the work that's being done at the state capitol from our lobbyist, Richard Pinsky of Acre LLP. He has been providing weekly reports now that the legislature is in session. And so I've been forwarding those reports. I wanted to give you an update based on his week 3 report on several projects that are local from Lake Worth Beach that he is following and tracking, and it has some traction. So it's good news that we're still alive, moving forward in the legislature. And so there are 4 projects. The first project is HB 3563. It is the 18th Avenue North and Wellesley Drive Lagoons Enhancement Project. And that has been sponsored by Representative Caruso. And that is an appropriation in the amount of $250,000 for that lagoon enhancement. So that bill is now in the House Appropriations Committee and is eligible for House budget consideration. So that's good news. The next bill is HB 3565, which is the 10th and 13th Avenue North Stormwater Upgrades Resilience. That is also sponsored by Representative Caruso and is in the Senate as well and supported by Senator Berman. And that is an appropriation in the amount of $350,000 for that project. And it is also in appropriation, the House Appropriations Committee, and eligible for House budget consideration. The third project is the House Bill 3567, the Parrot Cove Stormwater Resilience Project. And that is also sponsored by Representative Caruso. And that's an appropriation in the amount of $450,000. And again, that is in the House Appropriations Committee and is eligible for the House budget consideration. And the last project is HB 3869, and that's the Aquatic Facility Redevelopment. And that is sponsored by Representative Caruso as well. And that's an appropriation amount of $3 million for the Lake Worth Beach Aquatic Facility Redevelopment. So that bill has been referred to the House Infrastructure and Tourism Appropriations Subcommittee and the Appropriations Committee. So we're tracking these 4 items, and like I said, it's good news. We hope these are continue to move forward and be appropriated so that we can continue to have improvements within our community. Now, continue to keep you updated.
Thank you. And just by way of that, next week, Ms. Davis, Commissioner Maliga, and I are all going up to Tallahassee to meet with the legislators and just say, we really need this.
That's right.
We're going to put on our best face and beg a lot.
And beg.
And beg.
Right.
Beg. It's not beneath me to beg.
Greg with great dignity.
Exactly.
Okay, so thank you very much. And it's good to know. So where are we now? We are at
Florida.
Lake Worth.
We're at
No,
public
nobody-
participation, Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry?
Public
Consent.
participation.
Oh, public part, thank you. You're right at the top of the page. Are there any public comment cards that have any? Yep, here they come. Madam Clerk, do you have any public comment cards?
I
Any
have
public
one,
comment?
Madam Mayor.
Okay, can you please read it first?
Yes, let me set my timer because it's rather long.
Okay,
All right, this is from Wes Blackman, 241 Columbia Drive. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Commissioners. I'll be listening with interest this evening to the items under the new business portion of the agenda. Let me first say that I think it is important that you schedule a joint meeting between 2 of the most important advisory boards in the city. Actions taken by both the Planning and Zoning and Historic Resource Preservation boards can have far-reaching effects upon the enjoyment of one's property and the quality of life residents and visitors experience in the city. Recently, as part of my practice of being an urban planner, I have come across instances where buffers between residential and commercial zoned areas are degraded, non-existent, or deficient. 2 specific instances come to mind. In order to address privacy and combat security issues, one property owner on 8th Avenue North, whose property backs up to an alley, a church parking lot, and a vacant lot along Federal Highway, is before the special magistrate due to installing a 29-foot length of fence 2 feet higher than allowed by the current land development regulations. A variance was denied at the June meeting of the HRPB. The other example is of a single-family zone property which borders a vacant commercial lot along Dixie Highway. Damaged since Hurricane Irma, the wall on the commercially zoned property has been left unrepaired. Code compliance officers wrote up both property owners at different times. The latest conclusion as of last week was that the commercial property is in compliance with code. The city deemed it a civil matter between the two property owners. The crumbled wall still exists. These examples are just two of many which point to the need to address language in the land development regulations related to fences, walls, and gates. The standards in the code require revision so that they can be applied in an equitable manner for both commercial and residential properties. The regulations were written before the city's LED streetlights were installed, which exacerbates the problem of compatibility and harmony between commercial and residential properties. I urge you to schedule a joint meeting between the commission and these two important city advisory boards and direct city staff to address this compatibility issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Todd Velez.
Velez, Worth Beach. I would like to,
Do you say your ad, we ask you to do their address.
538 North G Street here in Lake Todd's Neighborhood Association. This was a coin comment made years ago in the city centennial from West Palm Beach. They used to have a placard out and you'd pin where you lived. And they did this as well for the city of Lake Worth Centennial. And we started adding in where some of the churches are since they're part of the neighborhood. And I like the quote of, well, you know, neighborhood associations, they're a lot like church too. Well, now you have that with Serve Lake Worth Day, which is about the third year. And the churches go out into the community in November and February. It's geared to be here every month, but right now for the last 3 years, we've gone out in those two time cycles. You're invited, and it has the information there, and that's well established now. We also have the sheriff's houses of worship. Speaking of God's Neighborhood Association, which have been passed out. Have you seen these? So it's I'll leave one. You have my covenant. And
We'll make copies.
so I'd like you to be aware of that. I'm sure the sheriff will discuss that. And that's it.
Thank you very much. It's a very active group, and you've had the things up at Sunset Ridge Park with the neighborhoods. Thank you. And now we have Michael Collins.
Mine was about one of the.
You have to come up here and speak, sir. And say your address.
421 South Lakeside Drive, unit number 6. Mine is actually about one of the agenda items. I'm not really sure how this whole thing works yet. So I just filled out today and I found discussing about, it was just good to see about the docks. It's all, I was going to comment about that and some of the other areas in the.
Do you want to talk now or do you want to wait till we talk about
I can
that?
talk right now.
Okay, go ahead.
So I've lived here for around 5-6 years now. I bought a condo here, love it. But I live right along the park. And so the waterfront there, we have $1 billion worth of real estate that is just gorgeous, but it needs a little bit of work. So the docks, this situation, I love to see that on the agenda because you're a new established government. And I was just kind of waiting to see if you guys were going to do anything about it. So it's awesome. There's a lot of things that could be done there, it's my opinion, but one of them to keep some of the riffraff out and some of the, squatters that I think that we're all a little worried about is, I'm not sure how it works, but everywhere on navigational charts and stuff like that, it says free dock.
which it is. I was wondering if there's any way that we could charge for that daily, like get staff there to actually run some sort of a somewhat small marina type thing, but it would be more of a, multiple days, but you pay by the day rate, maybe a few little regulated mooring balls. The whole situation, I feel, just needs a little bit of regulation. So maybe a staff, maybe like a little hut up there that somebody mans and greets people as they come in, figures out what they want to do, how long they want to stay. Maybe they need some repairs in their boat. Maybe they're just, staging to go to the Bahamas, all that, but be like definitely a limit on that. Another area would be the horseshoe area, the horseshoe pits, which, there's 10 horseshoe pits right on the other side of the thing. I just don't ever see anybody playing on those, and that could be a good area for another area with the boat launch and just kind of tie all that little section together. To just, I just think it just needs a little bit of, like a whole, employment, somebody there to actually like a whole section of the government to be there to regulate it. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, and I think there's some chit chat about that, so more to come.
All right, thank you.
Felicia Green.
I live at 632 Washington Avenue. I have a question about the cemetery, the meeting, because it was quite a few of us out there tonight thinking the meeting was tonight at 6. And so when you said 5, it brought me back because we all thought it was 6 o'clock. So I was trying to figure if the meeting could be, because there was quite a few people out there.
It's been publicized through a lot of the seniors or elders, I would say, for the area, that I actually have a space and a permit for Osborne Community Center for tomorrow night from 5 to 7. And that's the flyer that I've been sending out to the elders. The church has got the flyer.
I live right on the main street. Right?
Yeah,
Washington. I walked down there, me and my daughter, and it was quite a few of us out there.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
They knew that it had changed, and we didn't.
It was never set for Tuesday because obviously I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
Everybody always thought it was 6 p.m. because they got on the phone they talked with Rita.
Yeah.
And that's how we end up finding out.
Yes, I left a voicemail from Miss Retha last week that it was from 5 to 7 at the Osborne Community Center.
Yeah, that's how we found out tonight.
I apologize.
Can you help pass the word that it is tomorrow at 5?
I mean, I'll spread it as much as I can.
We have put it all over social media. Sam Goodstein did drop off flyers to the churches yesterday. I went door to door all along Pinecrest yesterday to making sure that people had the flyer. And we've also asked for it to be put on the city's website as well.
I'll be there and I'll spread the word.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing it up. Okay, I think that's it for the public comment, public participation. Next is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now we have new business. And now we're at new business A, which is rules and procedures of the commission. And do we want to hear from staff on this?
We want to hear from our attorney over there.
Yeah, and I did notice one thing I'd like to or add.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes.
Hello. Good evening.
So as you may recall, the request was made to revise the rules of procedure to change our electric utility special meetings within a month to a utility meeting to include the water utilities department. So that's what started this. And so myself and the city clerk went through the rules, and one other issue that we noted was that the agendas were being published to the public sooner. So that also made a change that was needed for when agenda items need to be in so that we can get time frame for publishing the agenda. So we made that change. Those are underlined and strike through and for those relevant sections. Two other areas that are highlighted in your agenda with the rules of procedure drafted to be revised are the issues with the blue comment cards. I believe, Madam Mayor, that was an issue you brought up from the city clerk, whether we still want to use those blue comment cards.
It's actually the clerk brought it up to me.
Okay.
Just,
My apologies. It was discussion about whether the blue cards are still necessary, and the commission wants to stick with that, since they are mentioned in the rules of procedure, and probably highlight that issue. And the other issue that has come up a couple times is their rules for adding items and presentation to the agenda, and those are also highlighted there. So I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns.
well, I have one. I'm looking at the Rule 5 Order of Business number 3 and number 6, and it says matters may be placed on the agenda by any commissioner, the city manager, or the city attorney. Now, I don't know what that was on purpose, but I think
That means you can't put anything on
the
there?
mayor.
I believe there's a footnote, and I'm not sure if maybe the footnote didn't show up. I think they meant when they say city commission, the rules that includes.
What would it cost to put?
We will make that change.
Thank you.
Bribery.
That was one question that I actually had. And does anybody have any comments? I see Commissioner Maligas light on.
I was just, for the sake of time, wondering if we should, on the order of business of a regular meeting shall ordinary be 1, 2, 3, 4 through, it looks like 176, but I don't think it's really supposed to be that. If we could move commission liaison reports and comments to the end of the meeting instead of having them at the beginning, or move the city manager up to our meetings or something. Because I kind of feel like when the meetings are over, like by the time some of our meetings are over, that the city manager and the city attorney are either A, too tired, or B, we don't think people are listening. And I want people to hear what you guys have to say. So I don't know if we should, however, we could try to couple those together to where you guys, the city manager and attorney, are part of our liaison. Like, I'm just trying to see if it's more.
That's a good idea, because there is, it is the time that we're a little fresh in the meeting, and it puts it all together and people don't have to wait until the end. So does, have any comments?
I don't know who's, your light is on for that or something else.
Yeah, mine was on for different, so why don't you go ahead?
I am interested in if we can move the liaison to the end. That does sound interesting to me. It's hard to, because we think everything is important for the public to know, right?
Right.
But I think I've asked other cities, what do they do? And they have one person that just gives like all the updates. We don't need every commissioner talking about every event that's going on in the city. If we want to make, part of the city manager's report in the beginning, include all those updates and kind of those announcements, then, if we want to take our personal comments and move them to the end. I just worry that people who care a lot about a particular business item have to sit here for so long.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. And then they got to set their presentation. So I was like, yeah, we're kind of tired at the end. So I don't know. I just feel like there's a way for us to marry those two things together. So maybe we can work on that. Like you said, maybe coupling it with not that we want to put anything else on the city manager. She's over there smiling. But yeah, that might be a good idea just for us to give her a report, and then the city manager could report. And now the mayor's shaking her head. She doesn't like that idea.
It's one of our very few opportunities to speak directly to our constituents in a meeting. So I kind of like the fact that we do it ourselves. And it's, there's always interpretation when you give it to somebody else. That's going to be said. So I'd like.
Hang on, wait, I got one more thing. And then number 5, although the mayor picked up number 3 and 6, when a matter comes before the commission that directly affects one election district being 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that how? Okay, so if something's affecting Mr. McVoy's district, then he should have the floor first to speak on that matter, unless he says, I digress, I'll wait till later. Is that the proper way for us to be doing this?
Right, that's what that intends.
Okay, because I don't think we've been doing, and I don't want to not do it that way. If it's Kim's district, give it to her first and let her talk on it. I think that's all I had a lot of other stuff highlighted, but I won't bore you with those two things.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, now Commissioner McBoy.
I think what I heard from Commissioner Stokes was the suggestion not that our personal reports, or liaison reports or community reports be made by the city manager. I agree with you that it's an opportunity for us to speak to the community. I think that's important. I have a little bit of hesitation of putting that at the end, but I see that there seems to be consensus for that, so I'm going to go along. I think the suggestion was, to the extent that our reports are, hey, there's going to be something happening, like I did today, maybe those could be made, rather than us repeating them, be made by the city manager as part of the city manager report. It's a way of shortening it up a little. We should keep our own, the opportunity to speak to the community. I think that's important. It's an opportunity for us to share some of the things that we feel that we're hearing are important or whatever. I do notice on Rule 5, number 3, matters to be placed on the agenda by any commissioner and the mayor, the city manager, or the city attorney. We have not always followed that in the time that I've been on here recently, that sometimes there's pushback, and I think we should be very clear that each commissioner has the right to put things on the agenda, and we should respect that. Similarly, the same with presentations. That's not always been followed. So let's just follow that. I don't see any need for a change to those. There is something, where was it here? I believe it's still Rule 6, yes. Item 8, the presenter shall have 10 minutes to make his or her, but the time may be extended to permit questioning of the presenters. We have sometimes said that there are no questions for presentations.
Mhm.
I'm quite hesitant to make that a hard and fast rule, because sometimes we will have presentations from somebody that is informational for the commission to learn something, and we very well may have reasonable questions to ask, and the person who's got information is right there. Sometimes the presentations are just neutral and they don't require any further action. They're sort of self-contained, but sometimes they're informational, and I think we should make use of that, not have we've sort of said that we don't have questions, but our rules actually say that we do permit them. And I think we should, I don't think we need to do it always, but there will be occasions, and I don't know whether you want to write it in that, if a commissioner has a question that we can do that, or how you want to do it, but I think it's important. To allow it.
Okay, I just have 2 comments on that. And number 3, first, matters may be placed. Now we have these agenda meetings, which I think are very helpful, and I would actually at some point like to extend them to more a month. I think that it's where it's placed in the agenda is like where I may have some issues, and I would like instead of being presented with a resolution written by somebody that we've got to pass, or like it appears on the agenda by a commissioner, or I don't think I've done it, and it's there as an action item. I would rather see, I think it would be, because we're all about processes. So I would almost think that it would be a more, unless it's,
Discussion,
what?
like a discussion?
Yeah, put it on for discussion. Then if it gets consensus, then we can say, okay, let's put it on the agenda for action. Because I think that, and we've done it a few times, this particular item was placed on the agenda a little prematurely because we had to take a look at it. The parking thing that we talked about is was another, things have been put on, I think, a little prematurely as action items. I would like to see us have a little either heads up or some discussion before.
And I hear that. Do you have any problem with the idea of having a combined that there might be a discussion? And for instance, tonight we have a number of items for discussion. I would not have a problem if discussion regarding item X also had an item after it with a resolution or an ordinance that's addressed whatever item X is that follows the discussion. And it might be that the discussion says, well, we have a long way to go, we're not interested, or yes, we can take action and do something with it.
Right, yeah, and then how we would put that on the agenda would be, I think, are you suggesting that we put, an item for discussion with a separate item with the resolution?
I think, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay,
I think the advantage sometimes to, a discussion is a very good thing. I don't think you would catch me saying discussion is a bad thing.
I would be very surprised.
Yes. However, that said, and I won't take it personally.
You shouldn't take it personally.
And that said, our community is also looking for us to take concrete,
Yeah,
I guess,
I'm not-
legal actions.
No, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't. I'm just saying it's a procedure and how things are presented to us. And I would hope that we would respect each other about, not bringing crazy lots and lots of stuff on the agenda, to respect each other on it. But I just think sometimes, and maybe that's just the way it is. Somebody puts it on for action. We say, you know what, we're not ready for action, table it, bring it back, talk about it. Commissioner Maliga.
So I'm gonna bring it back to if we can make a decision on moving the city manager and attorney back up to the top with commissioner liaison, if we're approving this, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to be approving this tonight with changes?
Right, you can approve it, certainly approve it tonight, or you can give us changes and then we can bring it back with those changes. Is that your pleasure? If I may comment on one thing.
Please do.
For the city attorney, since obviously we get paid for the time that we spend working on city items, it's always been our policy that if someone from the commission comes to us and says, hey, I want you to work on this resolution or this ordinance, we say timeout. Please add it as a discussion item on the agenda to make
Right.
sure there's consensus before we spend the city's money researching it and drafting up a resolution or ordinance. So, I'll leave that in the city manager's hand regarding staff, but we've always sort of followed that policy. So we're not chasing down 5 different special interest
Right.
resolutions or ordinances.
And I agree with that,
Yeah, me too.
which is why I think we had the pre-agenda meetings to see if we had consensus to put it on the agenda.
So a lot of where this came from is to put the discussion item first, to make sure there's consensus, so you're not spending legal fees unnecessarily. And that I think prior city manager had the same idea about staff.
Mhm.
Once you develop your work plan, they're working a plan and staff going off in 5 different directions. But,
I think we have to be real respectful of staff time.
Agreed.
So that would, so. Discussion item with perhaps let's see, but then that, if we have a backup thing of there's the resolution, we've already
We spent the
completed the
time.
process, and we spent the time.
Right.
So discussion items, are you okay with that? Bring it up as it is, unless we talk about it at the agenda meeting. I mean,
What's
that's,
Pre-agenda meeting.
we have the pre-agenda meetings now. So I mean, that would be a situation where we do have an opportunity to discuss something. Hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think?
Like a hot air balloon festival and you all go, nope, we're not doing it.
Yeah, really?
like
I
a
just might-
letter.
That's, let me see your light. Thank you.
I hesitate to want to put a resolution from another commissioner on an agenda like this, only because we have the sunshine law. So if a commissioner is putting it on the agenda, I haven't really had time to really understand what their goal is.
And you
on
can't
that,
call
or
them.
Do my own research or like think about it for more than 10 minutes. And I really hate making decisions on the fly unless
You
it's
do.
like an emergency
Yeah.
situation. So I would love for us, I don't think we have to be super strict with our rules, but if we have the common understanding that discussion items are fine, ideally, it would be brought up at a pre-agenda meeting, but those fall in a way where if it's brought up at that meeting, it might not make the next one, it might make,
Well, it depends on the clerk.
yeah, so for me, ideally, it would be brought up there. If we feel the need that, for presentations, I don't think we need to have to do consensus necessarily for that. But, an action item, I would just be worried because I can't go to the city manager and she would be acting as a conduit.
Right.
She's like, well, this is what Commissioner Milligan was
And she
intending
can't,
with all this.
Right.
And it's just a weird place to be in, I think. If one happens, I'm not gonna, and I feel comfortable voting on at that time, I'm not gonna be like, no, the rules, we decided this, but I would like to avoid that if possible.
So it almost sounds like what we're saying is unless there's, again, it comes down to respect of the process and respect of each other. Commissioner Malika?
My only other question was, it does say in here that we cannot take official action on work sessions. Is that a legal Florida thing or is that our rule thing?
That's really your rule thing, because if you publicly notice the meeting, you don't have to put out what specifically is going to be discussed. Publicly notice the meeting. If you do take final action, you need to allow for public participation. So part of the intent behind that was that work sessions, you don't usually take a vote and take official action.
But like, if we wanted to, let's say the next pool one, not one, and it's a work session, and we all agreed that we want to go with step A. We could not vote, then we have to wait till the next meeting. Could we, in this, could we make it if we all agreed or had a consensus to take a vote, if it was publicly noticed?
You could, in the past, we've usually then noticed that as a special meeting.
Okay,
So eliminate the work session.
and just do special meetings instead of workshops? I'm just throwing it out there because it seems like some of the stuff we talk about, then we gotta wait for 2.5, 3 weeks for another meeting.
And if we make it, well, a special meeting, do the rules apply? If we have a special meeting, we can only limit it to 10, do all these rules apply? But workshops, I think, give us an opportunity to be a little more relaxed in our conversations. And if we agree on something, I mean, it's gonna let them, again, with the clerk's permission, depending on the next agenda,
Right, but I mean,
under emergency.
right, but when we're going into budget and stuff like that, I'm trying to think, like, we've done some workshops, and if we're going into visioning or something and we all agree on something, we agree, why would we have to wait 2 weeks? Wouldn't it be great if we could say, all right, we all agree, can we take a vote and move forward?
But the-
Well, there's no drafting of anything. I mean, it's all sort of on the fly, then there's no language.
Yeah, and there's no
Settle.
public review of it.
Yeah,
If-
Well, there is if it's noticed, she said, and people know what the meeting is.
but they don't know if we're gonna vote or not. I
Then we would
mean,
have to allow public comment, which
Yes.
I love public comment, but if we're
Once in a
having a
while,
workshop about the
right.
budget and we get 30 people in here
Right.
that want to give 3-minute speeches, that they're gonna eat up our entire workshop. So I think we just need to be careful about what we can rely on our city manager, what is a special meeting and what is a workshop, and just make sure that we're.
So did we allow public comment? We allowed public comment at the workshop
Sometimes.
last week. I mean,
we
some,
sometimes
that's,
do.
yeah, I mean,
And we take a vote at the beginning of the meeting is pretty much how it's.
That would be something that I suggest that we actually have a policy on, because if you think about, we're all very committed here to public participation. But if we have a workshop and it's sort of generally understood, which it seems to be, that there is no public comment, we start the workshop and we say, hey, are we all okay with public comment? The public didn't know that. The only people who can comment is the people who happen to have come in. And I don't think that's healthy policy. We should either say, this is a workshop, we will allow public comment, and that's noticed in advance, or this is a workshop and we won't.
and like you
Does
said,
that-
Kim, you want to
does
hear
that
from the
make
public,
sense?
but sometimes it's like, we just want to talk amongst ourselves and get
Right,
stuff
it's the only
done.
chance we get.
So maybe we just need to say workshops, no more public comment.
Right.
If it's a special meeting, public comment.
Right.
Right.
Mr.
And we just have to
Robinson.
stick to those.
We're really complicating things, aren't we, Christie?
If we have don't have a workshop, we have a special meeting.
Right.
Don't have to vote at a special meeting. And if it's a topic that the public is that 30 people deep, then it's a topic that is that important, and that justifies calling it a special meeting. So eliminate the word workshop and call it a special meeting and move on.
Well, I think that we just talked about that, the workshops when there is, there are some times where we really just want to be able to.
Like our
talk.
vision.
And
Yeah, and
we're
we're
able to talk at a special meeting. I mean,
We can talk at a special meeting. That's what we were just saying. We made I think we just tried to make the differentiation. We workshop, although we do all of public comment, there are some times where we just have to get down to work, and there's not that many chances that we get. But if we call it a special meeting based on the city managers or us from the dais, I don't know, call it a special meeting, then there would be public comment. It would be noticed as public comment.
And we could vote if we wanted to.
And we could vote if we wanted to. And with the workshop, I mean, certainly everyone, I would hope, has everybody's email. If something's coming up in a workshop and you have something that you want to comment about it, you can certainly get in touch with us and we can voice, we can put that into our
And that's fine.
conversation. Right. So
I just think it's not a very good procedure to, on the fly.
okay.
Figure it out.
So, but are we gonna?
I like the special
Special meeting.
Or workshop, right, which is kind of the way it was set up in the first place, so. So where was that? Where was that? So we're going with workshops, no public comment.
I think that's the clear.
Yes.
I agree. So we have whatever changes you need to make after you add mayor.
Mayor should be first. Be very concerned about the mayors.
I'm annoyed at that. Just kidding.
And I believe Commissioner Malika has a question about moving up. Manager, any comments? I do pride myself on staying awake and ready for all meetings, no matter how long they last. So you could keep the attorney at the end. The city manager clearly.
I don't think it's about you guys being tired. I think it's more about the people who are listening and them waiting from 6 o'clock to 11, even at times 2, when I tell them to watch it the next day on YouTube with a glass of wine. To get to it's imperative information that you guys want to share with us. And I think that the residents need to hear it more at the beginning than through the end.
It was Commissioner Stokes' comment, I think that, did you think it should all go at the end?
No, I thought if we wanted to have the city manager give her update before announcements of
Right.
these are all the things going on in the city,
Mhm.
do that early, but if we had, when we give our, here's what I was doing this week and all that stuff that we're up to, I didn't feel needed to be that high on the list, but if we want to keep everything at the beginning, that's fine. I wish there was some way of knowing that, from 6 to 7 is going to be
Stuff.
liaison reports, comments, presentations, all that stuff. And if you really are interested in business, you would come at 7. I remember coming to these meetings.
And waiting and
sitting
waiting.
Oh,
waiting.
hours.
Waiting,
Hours.
and it's hard. And
Although
you
now
all
with
who are here
with
right
watching.
now, and you're waiting and waiting to hear us talk about how we don't want you to wait.
Strike that from the record.
Patience, my friend. Okay, do we want, so it sounds like we have 2 options. It sounds like we want to put everything together someplace.
Yes.
Include the city manager, city attorney's report with commission liaison and comments. And there's some folks that say we should put it at the beginning, and there might be some argument to put it at the end. I see Commissioner McVoy's light is on.
Shock. I would take the city attorney's suggestion because there tends often not to be a city attorney report. And it tends to be pretty short when there is one. I would say move the city manager's report to 6.5. Or 6A, or whatever you want to call it, right after or before, I don't care, of the commission liaison reports, and leave the attorney one towards the end.
Although since it's so short, does it really matter?
But I do like Commissioner Stokes' idea, like if we have something that's happening, just send it to the city manager. She can put her, here's what's happening in the city. And then if we have something personal we want to add, then we can.
Or if we forget to tell her about it,
Then we can
Which
add.
could happen.
could happen.
Okay, so what are we talking about? Are we talking about moving everything? up
6A.
front?
6A.
Right, but I mean, are we
6A for the city manager report.
6A for the city
That's
manager?
what you were thinking.
Sounds like we should go to a workshop.
Oh, stop it.
Herman, geez, don't be grumpy.
Well, since we're on the topic of it, let's move the approval of minutes to the end. The adjournment can go at the front. Just kidding.
Okay, let's stop this
Kidding.
foolishness. Okay, so does staff understand the changes that we are asking to make?
Yes, is there any change to using the blue cards?
Yeah, I'm
I
not sure.
couldn't
Can you
find that in
let
there.
us know?
Yeah,
I think we just highlighted.
I couldn't find it.
Well, I think it's-
Coming from, what?
Well, I think it adds a little bit of.
I went through it twice.
I looked through it before and I couldn't find it. Just for us who are curious, you
It's
mentioned.
on page 9 of the resolution.
Thank you.
It's in the resolution.
Leave it to the-
Rules. Okay.
Open the what?
What? I have page 8. Page 9.
Comment cards, it's highlighted.
Right, but I don't know what that.
It's under A. There's a okay.
But I don't know what we're trying to change. We don't want them, people to fill out.
That's the question. Historically, at least since we've been representing the city, we've had the blue card.
Yeah,
people sign them in, and then when you call for public participation, whether it's for the consent agenda or a non-agenda item, or whether for each agenda item, the comment cards are there, they get passed to the chair, and then you call them out and.
Yeah. I don't see any reason to change that, honestly.
Because you know what the person wants to speak about.
Yeah, I mean, it gives us a little, and then I have, yeah, I mean, yeah,
And it does kind of give you also a time certain, so
Right.
that people aren't, while the conversation
Yeah.
is going on, trickling up with more comment.
Yeah.
But if, sometimes people have gone back and filled out a comment card to come speak, and it wasn't at the beginning of the meeting, and that's fine.
Yeah, we don't have a time set,
Okay.
but there might be a time that the chair says, you know, we've already done public comment, there's further commission discussion, and someone comes up with a comment card at that point, and
yeah, once it's over, it's over.
Yeah.
We've had people come in late and want to do, make a comment on something that's not on the agenda, and it's way into it, so we say, no, thank
so
you.
we'll just leave that as.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so,
If we have the consensus, I have my notes, we'll make those changes and bring it back February 15th.
okay, great, thank you.
For what it's not right.
Oh, shut up.
Special meeting. I thought it was a special meeting.
Public, I say that with great humor.
Madam Attorney, do we need a motion for that?
So moved.
Well, I think we need.
We have to wait for the changes.
The changes done.
Yeah.
I don't think we need, I think we have consensus.
The power of consensus.
Consensus.
Consensus to provide the above direction.
All right,
Thank you.
yeah. It's 20 after 7, moving right along.
We're now on HRPB.
RPB.
Whose item is this?
I believe this is.
It was a sarcastic
It's
question.
clear, it's HRPB.
Herman Roberts,
Yeah.
Herman Roberts, what is it?
The PB stands for, I don't know.
Palm Beach?
uh,
Herman Robinson of Palm Beach. Go, Mr. Herman.
Okay, Mr. Robinson, you asked for this to be placed on.
Just a topic for discussion. We make moves and, this board has been in existence for a long time. It's worthy of review. I know there's been some issues with fairness and tax credits and windows and doors, and I just want to make it as best for all the citizens.
What are you suggesting? Give us a little more specifics if you could.
Well, my underlying concern is it more of an incentive to invest? I love historic buildings. I love our community to stay respectful of our history and the architecture that we have. When it becomes a disincentive to make improvements to properties that aren't as, I'm going to say, fully capitalized with some, if there could be a process, procedure, a fund that can help improve the greater improvements of all the historic district, that would be great. Maybe we need to talk about changing the district boundaries. I don't know. I think it's time to review how HRPB is working. We made a board, and it hasn't been fully reviewed. And we've been operating, and I know there's been discontent.
Mhm.
There's also been great projects come out of it. So, and if we don't want to, I think that it's worthy of a review process somehow, an ad hoc finished business.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all heard of some stories from folks that have tried to do things and, from not being on the historic board, I'm like, really? I mean, it's like, really? You couldn't do that? Which seems like a fairly, minor. So I think that's a good idea, Mr. Robinson. Commissioner McBoy. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know what the parameters will be, but I think we should certainly talk about it. Commissioner McBoy.
I would agree with the sense from what I hear from the community and my own thoughts on it, that there is a need for perhaps some slight course adjustment. I agree with probably all of us here. I think that we like the idea that we are more historic than a number of other communities, and we like the idea of protecting those as best as possible. That said, the two specific areas that I can think of, or that I've been aware of for a while, one is where there's a conflict between energy conservation and historic, we may want to adjust that slightly, given the state of the world and fossil fuels and climate change and all those things. We might want to be a little more tolerant of things that are not historical, but do have noticeable energy benefits. Things that come to mind are metal roofs, especially white metal roofs, window types, and maybe doors, I don't know. So that's one area that I think we might want to get some advice or look at how to adjust that. The other is when we regulate something, or when anybody regulates something, I think Commissioner Robinson sort of alluded to it, is the benefit outweigh the hardships that come with it. And obviously some of that is just a choice as a community. It doesn't have a single right answer. But for instance, looking at if we have a strict requirement that costs somebody 3 times as much for windows, and it's on the back of the house that's never seen except by the, by the road, is that a necessary requirement? Could we think about, maybe that's not quite so important? That's my thought.
Yeah, there's been, and I just, I've had, before I was elected mayor, I had clients working with the city, and some examples happen when the one guy wanted to put a seam metal roof on his house, which was a mid-century house. He liked the way it looked a couple blocks away. He applied to put the seam metal roof on his house. He was refused because now the ordinance changed and he couldn't do that anymore. Those kinds of things. And it was like, not thoroughfare, main thoroughfare kind of thing. Commissioner Maliga?
I concur. I believe that every board should be looked at every couple of years and reassessed, because obviously things change, visions change, time changes. So I'm in favor and supporting this. Not saying that we're going to dismantle, but fine tune it, tweak it to today's, culture.
And I think, go ahead.
Only other thing is, just like when this came up, discussion regarding the HRPV, we all said, whose discussion item is this? Maybe in our rules, we could put, if there is a discussion item, add it, the initials of the commissioner go next to it, so we all know who brought it forward. And the public knows, in case they want to reach out to that person. If somebody saw that it was Herman, then they could have sent him some thoughts and ideas on this discussion, that's all.
Respond to everybody.
I'm
I
sorry?
think that
Hopefully they'd be
Yeah,
responsive.
but I'm just saying, so they know who brought it forward, who's enacting this
So the
discussion.
big idea was.
Yeah.
And another thing, we had this just a couple of weeks ago where we were asked, and we sort of had to approve because they had counted on it. What is a historic addition? I mean, I think we all concurred that day that adding a pool is not exactly the intent of getting a tax break. That's
Right.
and so I think that gives us a really definite thing to look at in terms of defining what should get a credit and what should not get a credit. Commissioner Stokes.
When we have this discussion, I think it would be great for all of us to get a good education from staff about the differences between a contributing structure and a non-contributing, and
Conforming and non-conforming.
because I've heard complaints from people saying that their house was considered a contributing structure, so even more strict rules apply, but they look at their house and they're like, they don't see it. So I think we all need some education.
And who makes those decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like who said it was or it wasn't.
Well, yeah.
So
Well, there's a way they can do that.
I do respect our historic properties, and I think it's a great thing for us to look into and get educated on and fully understand and see where we can improve.
And I'm going to add one more thing. A decision was made a few years ago by another commission. Historic preservation ends at Dixie Highway. It was a decision made by a commission that west of Dixie,
Correct.
it's not going to be historic, okay? Now, if you are as familiar as you are, as I am, as a lot of us are with the neighborhoods west of Dixie, they are charming neighborhoods, 1920s, it's my house. And
Are you Western?
there was, I would like to look at that again.
Yeah.
No, I agree with
would
you.
agree that that seems like a somewhat arbitrary decision.
And again, it's not equitable because you're looking at different price values of homes and who gets those tax
Yeah.
benefits to those improvements. It's not, there's nothing equitable about those programs.
So we do have a public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any comments on this agenda item?
Commissioner Robinson.
Not
Oh,
Madam
oh.
Mayor.
Commissioner Robinson,
No comments?
do you have something?
Okay.
Something else?
So I have one comment that is of concern of mine. We've spent millions and millions of dollars investing in a project downtown that is being stopped by historic preservation, or partially stopped by historic preservation. And if we're going to decide to, I'm very concerned about the thought process of the buildings that are there. I'm sorry that the CRA created this method of leaving buildings that are derelict. They're really becoming a detriment to the neighborhood.
Well, they created it. I mean, that was-
Yes, I'm sorry, but now we have to deal with it. And if there's any possibility of adjusting just on an interim basis, historic preservation to move forward with an investment that, and I don't want to get into the size or design of the development, but we've invested to develop that property. And historic preservation is a problem now for the neighborhood. And I'm going to call them derelict properties. And so if there's any interim policy that we can set just for this property, maybe William Waters can help us move forward with this process.
Thank you. Commissioner Roy, we're going to start to wrap it up a little bit.
Yeah, if I'm hearing correctly from Commissioner Robinson, the situation is that we have a part of the city that has been aggregated properties, that there's an interest in developing a larger project. That area.
Aggravated or
Aggregate.
It's my math, aggregated.
I would say aggravated as well.
In any case, they were pulled together and there was an interest in doing a large project. It happens to fall within a historic district. If I'm understanding your proposal, I think what you're saying is, well, we should follow the rules of historic things unless we decide we're not going to.
Exactly.
And I have a difficulty with that idea. That seems like a recipe for unfairness, lawsuits, and problems.
I'm going to talk about the greater good, the bigger picture.
We're going to have a conversation about that. I don't think we're going to have that conversation tonight. We're going to plan a conversation about this, but I don't think we're coming to any decisions tonight. And
well, can
it is
decide?
It is a great. I mean, there was a perception that it's a historic building unless the city wants to tear it down.
Yeah.
Which I find.
Can we decide tonight to set up an ad hoc review of the historic process?
I think we're going to do that. I think we're going to, as the commissioner, you're asking us to do that, not to set up a committee. That's
with citizen input then.
Well, of course.
Okay. Well, it's good. If we want to take that on, then I look forward to that.
We have a comment card from Ted Brownstein. And again, this is all discussion, so we don't have to vote on anything.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's always a pleasure to be here. We live in this and we really appreciate the single family and the homes that have been restored in that neighborhood really look great. The historic process has been working at several levels, but I would like to echo something that Commissioner McBoy brought out about the windows. For some reason, windows seem to be a sticky point.
It's a big
the color tint or whether it's the form of the windows. And as I understand it from my brief review of the Muni Code, there is something in our statute that actually requires old windows to be repaired under certain conditions, even if they're not hurricane impact windows, even if they're not energy efficient. And, you know, these are broad statutes that are there and that staff is trying to enforce because it's on our books, right?
Mhm.
But really, if our priority is more for the safety in terms of hurricanes, and if it's more for energy, then maybe those concerns, at least for me, those concerns definitely trump being concerned with how dark the tint is from the street of the window, or, you know, it's the form of the house, it's the footprint, it's the street impact. And some of these details about windows, we're really laying a lot on our residents to ask them to restore old windows when they can upgrade them and both, you know, both for safety issues and hurricane and for energy efficiency. So I bet, you know, maybe the commission can take on one issue at a time instead of like the whole historic code and just do something on the window.
If you're gonna go big,
Thank
Ted.
you.
We're gonna grab it by the balls, right? Bull horns.
We have gumption.
Does it affect the character of the neighborhood?
Tom, Ted, we don't have to do all that. You can just give it to me. We have this little
We trust you.
daisy chain. Thanks very much. Thank you. And you can speak right now.
I just wanted, Ted Johnson, 802 South Palmway, in the beautiful South Palmway. I just want to encourage the commission to take a look at the original letter that was sent out to residents of each of the historic groups. And the promises that were made in that letter, I mean, the way that the historic districts were originally created. If we look
Back
at
in the
that letter-
90s. You mean back in the 90s?
Yes, I have a copy of that letter, and if we look at that letter, what we have now with very fine-grained, sort of overreaching decisions on the improvements that people should make to their houses doesn't really conform to that original letter of intent. And I think that a lot of citizens are either not taking out permits, which means we have a loss of revenue to the city and some perhaps shoddy work being done because of the strictness of the historic portion. And that doesn't do the city any good. And there's a lot of anger out there, myself included, over decisions made over improvements.
Yeah, they've been pretty
I
controversial.
bought a new car instead of windows. I'm not sure that's a good decision in the long run.
Could you send that letter? Because I've never seen that.
I was gonna ask-
Yeah,
Send
I
it
would
to
be
all of
happy
us?
to send
Would you
to
do
the
that?
board, Because I think it's very important to look
Yeah.
at. There was discussion of grants and
Right.
assistance.
Right.
And, you know, that it has become a police and court situation. It's a punitive kind of a situation.
Yeah. And I don't want to call it gerrymandering, but it was interesting how politically the boundaries were.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. I mean, there have been times where it's a disincentive. People just don't do the work because it's, you know.
Such a hassle.
It could be a disincentive.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was the word I didn't use, but I was meaning it. All right, thank you very much. I think we've moved on now.
Do we want to hear?
Oh, do we have another? No.
Do we want to hear from William Waters on his thoughts on his department?
Is he, I don't know if he's prepared to do that.
Yeah, we're just-
Waters, want to come on up?
Come to the stage, come to the
I
stage.
try to be kind. I try to be kind.
Every day.
Where's all my stuff?
Yes, our historic preservation program has a tumultuous history. Which try to give you Cliff Notes version of how we ended up where we are. There was federal money in the 80s and 90s to survey almost every city in the country. And Lake Forest Beach was surveyed, as was West Palm Beach and others. West Palm Beach acted much more quickly in designating their districts than Lake Forest Beach did. We postponed it almost 10 years. And in that time, many of the identifying factors of what constituted a historic district, the percentages of contributing versus non-contributing properties, the appropriate boundaries changed. But no one bothered to update the survey before designating the districts. So we have districts that have buildings that were listed as contributing that were altered to the point where they really shouldn't be contributing. We've had property splits. We had buildings that are missing. We had buildings that were added.
it's been a challenge. We have resurveyed all of the historic districts. There are recommendations within that to move some properties from contributing to non-contributing, to recommend buildings that are now of the appropriate age and historic architectural integrity to move them from non-contributing to contributing, and also some recommendations of possibly amending the boundaries, because as Mr. Commissioner Robinson mentioned, some of the boundaries are a little bit of a challenge. They were, I believe, created to leave out certain properties, and the percentage of contributing properties in the district would be at least 50 to 51%. In some areas, that threshold probably may not be met anymore. In others, it does meet that pretty closely. Also, back in the 80s, the federal government did have grants and many things that were all from historic preservation, but as federal government does, they build away those incentives, those grants that came from the National Park Service as well as the State Historic Preservation Office. They have tried to whittle away the federal income tax credit. There was a proposal to let that be in place for residential properties that are owner-occupied. It's never gotten off the floor into Congress, so it's been talked about numerous times. The city's also had struggled in the past, and we right now have no historic preservation staff except for me, having the appropriate staff to administer the code. There has been a time in not so recent past that I believe that staff was a little overzealous with the historic preservation ordinance. I come from a different background than many, because I did my preservation degree at the University of Virginia, and the guy who taught it owns a Villa Rotunda by Palladio. So in his mind, unless it's stupendous architecture and have a very long heritage, keeping it's really a good idea, but it's not required. So what's difficult for me to get to understand Lake Worth Beach is that our historic districts are a compilation of a period of time where buildings have been built over, say, 50 years, and it's the grouping of those that's significant versus the individual buildings. And that's a challenge because a lot of contributing properties, all a contributing property has to be is 50 years old within a historic district and have its original architectural integrity character. We have a large number of very simple, plain vernacular, masonry vernacular buildings that you see a lot of places. They're not Mount Vernon, they're not houses you see in Charleston. They're quaint cottages, and sometimes they're very plain. They were craftsmen. They were built by the average person. So there are people who appreciate those, and there are others who don't. And we struggle with that. And so I'm working, we do have some interviews set up to replace our preservation staff. And I want to get them off to the right foot, that we're not here to be draconian and not allow things to evolve and change in our historic districts. And I do want to present to you some of the ideas that our ordinance doesn't really need to be changed that much. It needs to be consistently administered. Also, during a period where I wasn't directly in control of historic preservation, the preservation tax credit grew a lot. And I was as floored as you were when I read the commission item that we given a tax break for a pool.
Yeah.
The ordinance actually reads as the tax break is intended to encourage the renovation, restoration, and preservation of the historic structure. That might entail an addition, but it doesn't cover pools. It doesn't cover new ADUs.
So how did that happen? How did that pool get in there?
We have had,
I don't want to put you on the, I mean, like, I always kind of want to leave.
the group, the manager of that portion of the department was much more open to like, oh, well, West Palm does that. Well, West Palm ordinance doesn't preclude the pool from being. We had a period of time where it was difficult for people, I think, to really read and understand the real letter of a law in our ordinance. We have an inclusionary code, and unless it is specifically mentioned that it can happen, it can't. Right. As an example, people keep asking me, where does it say you can't have vacation rentals? When I say that, where does it say you can? That's how our ordinance is written.
Right.
There's specific.
And that's pretty standard.
That spells out, but people were not taking the time to read the ordinance or chose to interpret it as they saw fit. Now, I will admit that since I wrote most of our codes back with Nancy Stroud in 2009 and 10, being overly close to it, I came to the conclusion that it said what I thought it said. And sometimes when you really pick it apart, maybe someone doesn't come to the same conclusion. We spent a lot of time in with the old commission and several of the things you've seen too, cleaning up ambiguous language or where it was not as clear as it could be. And so I would implore upon you that we have, and City Manager Davis is well aware of this, we have a very long list of just LDR items to bring to you for consensus on policy direction. Some may require a tweak, some may require further clarification of the actual language. Some we need to be consistent on how we apply it. And we have had board members and commissions that were willing to push the envelope of what the code really allowed. And there's some latitude on the floor of the statute that you can consider and take in information that isn't necessarily available to staff to come up to a broader opinion or a little bit different opinion than staff at an advisory board level or the commission level. And that's what the public hearing is about. There may be things that we just don't know about as staff. Here's the letter of the law. It's very black and white in most cases, but this is other information that would influence that decision. So I want to work with you all on this. Restorative preservation is very important because with sea level rise and climate change, it is a great incentive that you can get flood variances to add on to historic properties and substantially improve them without having to lift them up.
Yeah.
If we were to do away with historic preservation or remove some of the areas from designation, I doubt people would not be able to afford to fix those homes that will tear them down and build new ones. And part of the charm, I think everybody appreciates in Lake Worth Beach, is the eclectic collection of buildings from basically 90 decades. There's a little bit of everything here, and that's what makes it kind of fun. We do have a lot of interest in new buildings, which is now showing what the 2000s can be in a historic district. And historic districts are not meant to be frozen in time.
Right.
There are buildings that can be, and that's the preservation direction. But we don't really have anything that's technically been preserved. As an example, there's been a great interest in preserving this building and turning it back to its original use as an auditorium. That would be, I think, this building and maybe our city hall annex would be kind of our landmark buildings, for lack of a better way to put it. But our city annex originally was a school, and then it lost its top in a hurricane, which lots of things did in Lake Worth Beach, and it became City Hall. And so I believe that the preservation of its interior function may have to be an adaptive use, but this building really could serve as a good example of a true restoration preservation project where its original intended use is brought to a more modern activity. But where City Hall goes, it's up for debate.
We need a new city hall so badly.
You digress a little from.
You did ask me to come talk, and I
Yes, we did.
have that habit of being.
And do you know that the annex also used to hold our municipal courtroom?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you didn't mention the library. Do you think there's any possibility of adjusting somehow for the elimination of the derelict properties that are a homeless attraction now between L and M?
Yeah, I guess maybe you answer this question, so I'm prepared for it. District boundaries are amenable. The area that was designated downtown, long before it was designated, was identified between 2nd Avenue North and 1st Avenue South, from Gulfview to Dixie and then on to A as a downtown core area. The comprehensive plan has identified it as being the area where higher density intensities would be appropriate to support the downtown. And what was very important was the historic character and sustainability of the long term of Lake and Lucerne. Over time, there have been a lot of buildings removed between the alley south of downtown and north of downtown to 1st Avenue South and 2nd Avenue North. There's parking lots, surface parking lots where there were buildings. The surveys that were originally done had a lot more buildings and they were removed. Specifically, the CRA properties that were bought, I don't know how long ago, there were some buildings removed from those and they became surface parking lots. The integrity of the district is very weak south of and north of the alley. An argument could be made to remove or alter those boundaries to strengthen the overall number of contributing properties in the downtown district. Or that's an action by you as a commission to look at that, and we can evaluate. Here are the numbers. What do you do? Keep in mind too that our LDRs treat the development potential of properties in historic district and not in historic district exactly the same if they are zoned the same. There is a higher level of scrutiny for architecture in historic district, but the development potential is actually the same. The other avenue is that the buildings that are in the worst shape could be condemned. That means that they have lost 50% or more of their structural integrity when it comes to being renovated. I've been in the buildings and I have done an assessment. I've given it to Commissioner Davis. Some of the buildings are actually in fairly good shape. What did I say?
Commissioner, we know.
Others are challenged. It would cost far more than the structurally worth, in my estimation, to fix them, but that's not a carte blanche to condemn the buildings. The other avenue, most historic preservation ordinances are geared toward the public good. Historic preservation is seen as something that benefits the public, and you are only a steward for your historic property. And if you choose that you're just tired of being owner of historic property, you put it on the market. Many preservation ordinances have a component whereby, based on the value of the building, it has to be put out for sale for a certain period of time. It's usually a minimum of at least 3 months. And if no one comes forward to replace you as a steward of that historic property, and the city or the municipality involved doesn't act on it, then you are entitled to a demolition permit.
Do you think the city commission would act as efficiently as an ad hoc review, like the Charter Review Committee or the Education Committee, in terms of addressing some of our concerns for historic?
Well, I think that the suggestion that was made by, and I was reading, but I was listening at the same time, a joint meeting with the advisory board, because they do struggle with the ins and outs of the historic preservation program as it is. It should be without color, without bias. It should be equal to everyone, but not every situation is the same. And I've also been asked while I've been here, and the mayor brought it up, what's happening west of Dixie? West of Dixie was kind of surveyed, but nothing's been done with it. And
a vote was made not to do it.
I don't know when that was. It's not been since I've been here.
It's before you got here.
But it begs the question that, because of substantial improvements from the building code side, we're losing a lot of buildings west of Dixie.
Right.
Because a substantial rehab there can easily exceed
And
50% area of the building or the value. And so, I think I'll tear it down. And that's what kind of happened with the NSP2 program. It was put in place in 2009 or 8. The vision was, we'll restore the buildings, but they found that it was so cost prohibitive to restore them, it's easier to tear them down and build new ones. And so most of the NSP2 houses over there are all new.
Right.
Establishing a new boundary would require the homeowners to vote, because that's
Our
how
ordinance doesn't require a vote. It is encouraged to have public support,
it was established. That was how it was originally established, though.
but I don't think it was required. It was intimated. I think right now our
It was the city commission.
by city commission request, the preservation board request, or at the request of an owner. We have had some properties go from being contributing to non-contributing, from non-contributing to contributing to make use of the FEMA variances and some of the historic tax credits.
So if we're talking about if we're talking about changing the boundaries, the citizens would have no input. It would be a commission decision. Well,
it's not a referendum.
They would have no authority to make that decision.
I wouldn't say that 100%, and I'll just use this as an example that's going to come up for you all. We have had a number of emails requesting us to move forward with the designation of a Sunset Drive property as an old farmhouse on it. That's been in a basic litigation stance for 13 years to be developed. I would think that if there was a great preponderance of support from citizenry to have it designated, we were going to get a lawsuit, and the cheapest way out of it is to buy the whole thing. To have it designated. The owner, I'm sure, is not going to agree to be designated because they've been trying to get it sold to be developed for longer than I would want to admit.
And that house has been standing since Ray Smith sold it, empty. It's ridiculous. And it's the most beautiful farmhouse up on that hill. it's the saddest when I think of that property, and I know that you're talking about it. It's very sad.
But in depending on what the investment backed expectations are, predicating the person's investment in the property, you don't necessarily need to have the owner's support or historic designation. However, you get in a problem where, okay, someone's bought a property, they're getting ready to develop it, it's not an historic district, all of a sudden the city says, oh, I want to designate it.
Right.
You're fraught with trouble doing it that way. You can buy their way out, and in some cases, people have, reluctantly sold their property that they thought they were going to develop because the city wanted it designated and it was preserved. In other cases, people litigated it and the property came down. It was because of the investment that were made, predicated on what was on the books at the time. And the Commissioner Velez mentioned that we follow what we have on the books, and that's what we have. And so if we need to amend components of it, that's perfectly appropriate. And I do think that meeting with the planning and zoning board is also a good idea. Because they have struggled a little bit with certain things.
I spoke the other day with the mayor of Belgrade, which about ARPA and different things. And what they've been doing is in homesteaded properties that need work, they've been giving ARPA funds to actually do a roof or do the windows or, so I think that when we talk about ARPA, when we finally talk about it, I think it kind of goes hand in hand. Some of these west of Dixie properties that aren't getting it's only homesteaded. I think there was a purpose a few years ago. I think it was a sad purpose when they decided not to do west of Dixie. I think it was based on things that were less than admirable. So I would like to look at what?
Well chosen words.
Yeah. I as part of our historic thing, I would like to look at that again, about the boundaries. So
Anything else I may try to enlighten you on.
You have the winning lottery numbers?
They're really.
As I told someone today, I've committed if I ever win the lottery, I'm going to keep 10 million for myself and the rest is going to be invested in Lakewood Beach.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's actually kept me from winning. I don't know. I only place your numbers, on all of them every week. So
yeah,
I pray you win.
I pray I win too.
I pray you
win to see what $100 million could do in Lakewood Beach.
Oh my God. Well, I'm telling you, we've got to hook up with the feds because they are selling. I mean, everything last week in Washington was, we've got money to give you. So we've got to really figure out how to get it.
Well, on that note, much of the federal money past and somewhat present, we need shovel-ready projects that are in the pipeline, and we don't have a lot of those.
So,
We have a lot of
so what
ideas.
happens is we don't have them, and so we never ask for anything. We never get anything. So some of that shovel-ready, maybe I would like to see a more clear definition of shovel-ready. If we have and I think some of this money is not exactly for that. It's like for studies. It's like, just different things. We'll never get anything if we don't have a shovel-ready project, is
And
what
there's
I'm
money to
hearing.
help you get a project to be
Right.
shovel-ready, and then that's like economic development,
Right.
like Balboa Road. We got money to help design it, and then we got money to help
Right.
implement it. You gotta
Exactly.
start somewhere.
I know, and I feel like I'm frustrated. You can hear my frustration. Okay, so we're gonna define what the credits are. We're gonna have a meeting with HR. I mean, when I listened to the HRPV meeting about that, the light, how much light could come through the window, right?
Tinted windows.
They said, they were like, okay, let's watch the commission, vote against us. It was a little punitive on their part. I was a little disappointed. But we do need to talk, and it's been a long time, and thank you, Herman, for bringing it up. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Explanation was very helpful.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's, it's funny because people say, oh, your meetings go too long, you talk to us, but that's the only way we learn stuff. That's the only way we can figure things out. Next on the agenda is, the next one is a discussion regarding the establishment of a resolution ordinance to require developers to meet with stakeholders about the development. Isn't this in the works? Come on back.
Might as well just sit up here.
I think I'd rather stand and sit.
They're really.
More important when I sit. This was brought up a while ago,
Yeah.
and I worked and collaborated with Christie, the other city attorney, possibly. I've lost track of the other city attorneys who help, but we have ordinance language to amend the LVR to facilitate a requirement that developers contact the interest and affected parties associated with the project.
And can you explain for the public what that means?
due notice, a due process notice in Florida requires it, and our ordinance requires it, we send out notices for projects that are of owners of record within 400 feet of a property that's being considered for development. An interested party falls within that 400 feet. An affected party is an interested party with a financial or substantial fiduciary connection or effect from that property of that proposed project. So all interested parties are not affected parties, but all affected parties are interested parties. So,
Right? Like I'm on Jeopardy. Who is?
I love the fact that she gets.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's a helpful background.
So the ordinance is set up that to fit within, there are parameters that we have to follow. There's a 180-day window by the time when a project comes in, is determined to be complete, by the time which we have to have a decision made on it. And if there are delays based on that, we need more information, that doesn't count for the 180 days. It's 180 days are sitting with us. So I'm trying to be careful not to extend that, because the 2 extensions that the city commission's already approved for the affected parties to ask for continuances on some projects gets us really, really close to that 180 days if that's filed. So what I propose in the ordinance is that at the time a developer submits an application that's deemed complete, they must send out a notice within the 400-foot radius with a 15-day notice saying, in 15 days, we're going to have a meeting. You're going to kind of be able to see what we're proposing. Staff could be involved or not. It goes into, describe the project, what kinds of incentives are you asking for, what kinds of financial backing are you expecting from the city. It would apply to plan developments, which there's like 4 different kinds. Projects that are either obtaining sustainable bonus incentives or transfer development right incentives, developments of significant impact, and those are projects of 100 resident units or more, or 100,000 square feet or more, and all projects before the CRA. That's about, if things were as busy as they were last year, that's about all we probably handle. Within that same time frame, staff is already reviewing that project for the site plan review team and putting their comments together as to what needs to be done to either the private code, deal with other issues from various departments. So I don't think that requirement is going to extend the review period that much. It will be incumbent upon the developer, and I will recommend that our pre-application meeting, have your mailer ready the day you put in your application and mail it out that day. If you diddle around, it's on you.
Why not make the mailer part of the application?
That's what I bet it will become part of the application when they mail it out. I mean, we can't pre-prepare.
Required to be part of the application.
I don't want to be responsible to have it mail it out. We have it's incorporated in there. It's on the incumbent.
How else are they going to notify the community?
This.
How else are they going to notify the community?
If the developer do it. All the noticing, like the mailers, are done by the developer, not by the city. We provide them the letter, but they mail it out. And this is set up basically the same way. But those letters, like the actual labels and all that sort of stuff, is going to be part. If you need to have that today, the more you diddle around, your project will be delayed. And so I don't think it's going to have an overly negative impact on the schedule. However, the public needs to recognize that, just like as an example with the mid, there was a group of people that came in and wanted it to be a movie theater. I'm like, well, they wanted those apartments, not a movie theater. So there have to be realistic expectations. If you come to this meeting and you want something that code doesn't allow, or you want something totally different than what the developer is proposing, either the project may die, or you might end up having to accept that, okay, the project's moving forward that you really don't like. And then you can, air your concerns at the public hearings. And the ones that I've mentioned all will have a public hearing either before an advisory board or 2 hearings before the city commission. And so there will be other avenues for the public to be involved to make their comments if they don't feel like they've been heard by the developer. But the opinion of what is desirous of in Lake Worth Beach does run kind of the gamut. And that's another area we talked about that we want to discuss, the sustainable bonus incentive program and the ultimate vision.
Yeah, we never came back and defined what we meant by incentives and sustainability.
Right. I think that, and I'm sure you'll talk about it because the biggest application the city's ever had, most complicated one, the Gulfstream, has actually been submitted.
Right.
And it kicks every single item that has to be reviewed known to man. We're trying to get the comment screen to move that forward. You're going to have an opportunity to talk about a lot of the incentives of historic preservation as well as development incentives for that project based on the LOU and the LOI, have all of that incorporated.
LLI,
LOU is like letter of understanding. And
just
letter of
again
intent.
for folks, yeah, okay.
Sorry.
And they've been submitted,
What?
the letter of intent and the
It's
letter.
already been signed by.
That's
you.
right.
It's already been approved.
Okay.
You all approved it in May 25th.
Oh, God, that was a long time ago.
And so we're working on that. Some of the calculations of what the financial impact of those haven't been derived, because we just got the project and some of it's based on the amount of air conditioned square footage and some other things. And I'm working on trying to put that together. There's a table that goes around and that needs to be filled out more completely as to what all that is.
Can we put, a question, can we, like, if somebody put in plans for development, if someone wanted to look at those before they came for public comment, because public comment, you know, I understand that we say, well, there's public comment of HRPB and there's public comment, but if somebody really wanted to look at the plans, that we can't put them on the website, we cannot publish them?
Well, they're not
I mean,
ADA compliant, so
that's
part of it. And our notice says, please email us
yeah.
or call us and we will schedule a time for you to come see them in our office, or we can email them to you.
You can.
Oh, yeah, we could do, in some cases, we can do like a little Dropbox or whatever it's called, like this.
Some other thing, right?
And we've gotten, pretty good at that. In addition, in the past, and I've made it, and I've been stickler about this, but it seems to have had trouble meeting it. As soon as that notice goes out 10 days before the hearing, there should at least be a draft staff report and the application that's there is complete. So if somebody wants to come see it, they can see the whole application and see staff's report.
Or it can be emailed to them.
It can be emailed to them, at least the staff report. The plans, they're kind of big, so oftentimes it's going to have to be a Dropbox, they're going to download it. They could do that. We have been, either because of staffing challenges or whatever, of trying to give as much time to address things. That 10-day window is not always met, but I've kept, now that I've got a little more favorite staff, I've said this 10-day window must be met. Once that notice hits someone's door, they have the right to call us and see the application.
Okay.
Or email us and ask about it.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes, two things. So in this resolution or ordinance to require developers to meet with stakeholders about the development, I would also like us to consider social media and web pages for transparency. One thing with the Gulfstream and a lot of the other developers, we've asked them, can you please create a website or put your stuff on social media so people know what's going on? I don't know if we can put that language in there, that there's an, accessible website or update page for people, for the residents.
Well, I think part of that's going to follow this because not every developer has the means to create a whole web page for a potential project that may or may not happen. We do have potential, once you have an application that's in, we do have a little button and a little window in our website that says coming projects. And for the most part, we have a rendering and some information there. It's not impossible that we could add a little bit more information on our website and encourage a developer to have something created, like what the Zephyr Green did it and the Gulfstream have done it. But that takes some time and we may have to accept it. It's not a very free website, it's just plans.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's just an update, like when the Gulfstream submitted their plans, they, did an email blast. We've submitted our plans to the city. So that's first. The second thing is that I do believe that this works. And I think it's also going to help save the time of the public and the time of the developer from putting time and money into a project that the community may not support, right? And we're dealing with that with the townhomes that are going on Lake and Lucerne. Forgot how many there are. It's a CRA project. And that developer has met with Tropical Ridge. He's met with Royal Point Sienna. He's, heard the concerns of the surrounding neighborhood on the design. The same thing with Sunset Ridge. Nobody, including our city attorney's office, ever thought that Rolo could come to an agreement with the developer. And now they've come to an understanding, right? So now it's, now it's getting Murray Hills on board in the surrounding community. So, I mean, I think that it does work. I think that the developers also have to be understanding to know that our residents are our top priority. And if they don't support, it's gonna be hard for us to support you, right? So I think that this is a great thing. I mean, obviously, we have 42,000 plus residents, not everyone's gonna agree. But if the majority of the people who are in the community support the project, then I think that this is a good way to have open communication
I
and
think,
save time and money.
I think that's helpful. I mean,
Let's do it.
you always want the community behind you, but I think we also have to bear in mind the legal part of it is that if it's zoned properly and if it meets the setbacks and if it's, I mean, they can't.
No, that's the given. I'm not saying we're gonna build a movie theater where there should be an apartment building, but it's getting the buy-in from the
Have a lot
community.
of Public input and comments on projects that do meet the code. And to go back to the history just a tiny bit, this is sort of Mr. Davis's edification, we downzoned the city significantly with our redo in 2013. We put in parameters where a building can only be so big in the lot, where you should go from setback to setback. We put in floor area ratio, limited the overall bulk and height of the building. And what was lucky and fortunate is that it hit when we had a recession.
Right.
And so, but now there is movement that if we make zoning changes that negatively affect the economic potential of a project, it's potential that the city has to pay that person out. So we have to be careful that, again, creating unrealistic expectations that, oh, just to say an example, this certain area of the city really only deserves two-story buildings and zoning needs to be changed. We will likely receive lawsuits now based on Florida statute that the code now lets me go through a conditional use process to get a four-story building. And you're giving me no avenue anymore. We'll have to watch that and,
I believe it was passed.
Yeah, I believe it was too. We have a couple of things that are gonna be trouble.
Really awful
This is a
legislation.
business license for the.
Oh, we're aware.
So, I know that, Ms. Godot and, Ms. Lenahan and I will try to keep you abreast of that and steer you to the right direction. We do have within our code a lot more latitude in encouraging appropriate development than many cities have. We have caps. And I compare ourselves to West Palm Beach too often, but we have a charter that says 65 feet east of Dixie, 100 feet west of Dixie. We have components in our comp plan where the incentives are maxed out. You can only go like this, whereas in West Palm, they just basically threw the baby out with the bathwater.
They really did.
Sorry. And said, well, if it's good for the city, then it could be however big you want it to be, basically. It's driven people in the historic district nuts. And so we have caps that it's like a wedding cake. If you do this, you can get here and a little bit further. So we are much more protected than many cities because we've already established a maximum. And there's almost, unless we have a completely different commission that comes up in a referendum that says, oh, we think 150 feet is great in Lakewood Beach, which I do not think will ever happen. That's pretty much actually thinking it's in place.
Commissioner Davis, now you've got these.
Highly elected, the newly elected Commissioner Davis.
This is the well, everybody else.
I'm telling you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to summarize. So I'm so grateful for William, Mr. Waters, to be so prepared to answer the question. It's been very educational for me, getting background of the dynamics of the historic growth and process. One thing he has prepared, of course, a draft ordinance. And so I just want to make sure he breaks down the framework for that ordinance. And it seems like the commissioner seems very satisfied with the direction that he has proposed and
Ordinance for what?
for the ordinance for the developers meeting.
The stakeholders.
The stakeholders, meeting with the stakeholders. So he has a framework and I just wanted to summarize that framework to make sure that we're clear as to how that process happened. And also share the process that it will take to make these adjustments in our regulations.
Well, in summary, it's a proposal which requires a developer to notify the 400-foot radius, providing a 15-day notice of a public meeting. That meeting needs to be convened somewhere relatively convenient that's accessible. I think a lot of them are probably going to happen at the Hatch, which is a CRA building because it's just centrally located. The projects that are affected are those that are developments of significant impact, projects that involve sustainable bonus or transfer development rights, or our planned developments. And we have residential plan developments, mixed-use plan developments, urban plan developments, and just general plan developments. So we have about 4 different kinds. And then there are some projects that are smaller that stay with an advisory board that will obtain or be working with sustainable bonus provisions. So that's required to be sent out. Then also the developer must cover certain areas of the project's parameters within that meeting. What am I asking for? What type of project am I asking for? What kind of jobs may be generated? Is it a commercial, office, residential, or mixed? Are there affordable housing components to it? What kinds of incentives am I going to be looking for from the city?
Traffic.
Economic or financial? It's an overview of how it, if they're asking for any kind of waivers, variances, deviations, exceptions from the current from the code. It does have a caveat in it that what is presented isn't guaranteed to be approved. It can't be guaranteed necessarily that it actually meets the code, what's been presented, and because we haven't given the window of time for staff to review it. And then there is a reporting out period. The developer must provide back to us who came to the meeting, some general minutes from that meeting. The notice that was there, and some other things that will be incorporated as part of the package that will move forward to the advisory boards. So you will see, well, did 5 people come to the meeting or 500? What were the general concerns?
That's great.
That were
That's great.
would be addressed. How did the developer, and we're going to request, we got this feedback, how are you proposing to address it or not? Either it's not required in the LDR, or that's a really cool idea, or whatever it might be. And again, the cost of putting the whole thing on is on the developer side. Now there is a place where I can put in there the results of the meeting should be publicized either in collaboration with the city's website or your own website.
Right.
Because I think we do have a hyperlink, as long as it's all ADA compliant, that the little project thing that pops up could be hit, and then you could have, okay, we're reporting out of the public meeting, and we can, I think we could, because Word has a way to create an ADA compliant document. Their minutes or reporting out could be required to be ADA compliant. That's again the cost of the developer. I think that would be too onerous based on that.
And we had success with Gulfstream when we did that. We had so many comments, pro and.
It was great.
So the process, since it would be incorporated, I believe, in the administration section, which is Article 2 of Chapter 23 of the Development Regulations, would be that we organize a real ordinance. It's just a draft piece right now. It needs all the ins and outs of the legalese that Christie or Elizabeth can help with. There'll be a public hearing scheduled with the Planning and Zoning Board. This will be advertised, as well as the Historic Preservation Board, because there are our local planning agencies and review all changes to the LDRs. Then it will come to you for 2 readings as a formal ordinance. We likely will tack on a couple other little things with that ordinance, since we have the opportunity to amend the LDRs, and we've been waiting on a couple of things for a while. And so you may see more than just that by itself.
We can do it.
And we probably could have it done by May.
Okay. I see a couple lights on, Commissioner McBoy.
I think there's a light there. Commissioner Stokes, I don't know if it's.
Yeah, I have a question.
Who's first? Go.
So, will you be telling us what those couple of extra little things are before they go through all the boards?
I just mentioned what I'm going to add. There's a couple of things for what you've all asked me to add
Oh, okay.
that aren't in there. There's a couple of things that have to be added based on the comments tonight.
Okay.
And then that's easy to do. I can have it done by tomorrow.
Okay.
And then turn into an ordinance.
Okay, great. And then I just had a question about, I know we can't require the developer probably to spend tons of money in mail, but for projects that are in our downtown or in like these very centrally located places that the public enjoys a lot, how do we notify people that aren't just within 400 feet? Because I know a lot of people have
Major thoroughfares.
a lot, yeah, and Dixie, like the major thoroughfares, like how do we get the word out? A lot of people are interested in what our downtown and Dixie are gonna look like. That's just.
I think we need to promote people looking at our website. I think our website needs to be user friendly, and I think people need to get in the habit of checking it, because that is one central place. And at Facebook, we're doing Facebook as well, but
And people need to visit if they can, if it's in the CRA area, a lot of projects are in their webpage.
Absolutely.
Right.
Right. They're oftentimes on their webpage before it even becomes a real project. We've even gotten an application. the townhouse project that you're talking about, it was Village Flats, it was already approved something else, but they're amending it. I think they have some information in the CRA website about it.
So restricted to 400 feet.
What we can do too, that will actually extend a little bit, we can have the notice, it may end up being a free-for-all if too many people know about it in a way. Definitely the notice could be sent to whatever the identified recognized neighborhood association is that where the project's happening. And that would encompass more than 400 feet. But I don't know whether we want to send it, I mean, I'm not preclude people from commenting, but if you send it to the entire city, the whole city's gonna come, quite possibly, and we may never get out of a meeting.
To also include, I think we also included, in the proposed ordinance about it being posted on the property as well.
Yeah,
So that helps.
and we
Right.
want to change how we post property.
It's very vague. It's
Well,
hard.
Very little.
Yeah.
It's little and I like bigger ones, but I mean, again, because of the inability to put things on the website, we've got two options, email or call.
Mhm.
And so I want that bigger and hopefully people will like, just not look at it. I don't know what to do, we'll call the number. or
Yeah,
email.
it's not very helpful right now. Thank you. That's a good idea. Commissioner McBoy?
Actually, my concern was very similar, that there are projects that affect much more, or that there are interested parties in the city that is much wider than just 400 feet. Certainly not all of them. I don't know how you balance the concern that everybody and their brother will come, but I would like to see some, I would echo that concern, especially for things on the major thoroughfares, on the downtown, that there be some additional way that people are aware that it's happening and that comes from the developer.
The public information, I forgot how we did it for the Gulfstream neighborhood meeting. Everybody, we knew that was way more than 400 feet of interest. And that public meeting was publicized from the city side standpoint of either through social media or something. I don't see a reason why we couldn't do something with this that would provide a little bit more of an avenue. That wouldn't be in the ordinance itself, it would be on us to do, but it could become a standard operating procedure to do that.
When,
Tomorrow.
Yesterday.
I hope we have it all in place by May.
with the LDRs.
Yes, that would be our change.
Good. I thought this was going to be a simple discussion, but good.
And over 30 minutes, I don't want to become a workshop.
Become a workshop. Right. Thank you very much, Miss. It's a mysterious world that you live in, that people, it's really hard to understand with, different regulations of why is it this or why is it that. I think the more that we can get information out to people, so.
Topic you want me to cover?
Yeah, mobility and parking.
But I can think of something. Do you want to take a little break? I would like to run out. I need to bring some stuff for the Snook Islands as well. I need to get out of my office. Do you want to take a quick 10-minute break? Okay, we'll be back at 25 after, Madam Clerk. Is that 10 minutes?
Close enough.
That's 7 minutes.
Well, all right. Not too much time.
Michael, thank you for your comments.
I gotta run.
Well,
I'll watch it on YouTube. Good seeing you, Aaron.
good.
Madam Mayor, it's 8:34. Would you like to continue?
And they said because of the configuration of the circle.
Yeah, and they're reconfiguring it too, so, but you
Yeah.
want to reach back out to them,
Yeah,
because
so.
I just saw them last month.
Hi, good evening.
What this used,
Can you hear me?
I know. That was a good.
I'm
I can
good.
hear you
That was
and
a
everyone
win.
else, Madam Mayor.
Well, we're just having a little friendly chats up here at the dais. Okay, it is now 8:20, no, 8:34.
8:35 and we are live.
And we are live. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, folks, for your patience with that break. We need to get back to business. We have a couple more things to do.
Right along.
Moving right along. The next thing we're going to talk about in discussion, we have a lot of discussions tonight. Next one is the Parking Mobility Advisory Board, and I believe this is Mr. Robinson's question. So take it away, Mr. Robinson.
Well, I had handed out some possibilities, and it's your option to create some sort of a board, again, to address mobility and parking. The CRA is a disappointment in not understanding that 100 units could have contributed to a fund. Each one of our major developments in the last 2 years could have contributed to a fund that would have helped stimulate mobility. We have a parking issue, and we seem to kick that down the road. So it should be given more attention than we're doing. We're going to have to talk about paid parking at some point. So at your pleasure, I think we should create some sort of an ad hoc, study again.
And who would you think should be on that board?
Well, we have, I thought we were going to have a process of interviewing for those interested people.
No, what I mean is some boards are more specific in what they are looking for than others. If someone,
well, heavy on the merchant side.
right, okay, right, the downtown merchants. So let's have some input from somebody else.
I have a few questions, I guess. I know, well, I see Mr. Waters stepped out, is he done?
He went home.
He went. He's like, I'm done with you people.
Yes, because we did talk about having a citywide mobility plan and we asking what the steps were to get us to a mobility plan. I would love citizen input along the way. I'm a little uncertain of how much power a volunteer board would have when it comes to creating policy about where paid parking. or
I would not
residential
want
parking and
them. I
things
think they
like
would
that
only
go.
make a recommendation.
Advisory, yeah.
Right, yeah, so it didn't, it was unclear. I think in the original notice or draft that was sent to us, it said something about they'd be able to resolve issues
Yeah.
and things like that. So I was a little curious about what kind of power they would have and how it would feed into our mobility plan. I really think it's important that we start the process of developing that plan, which I think we all agreed to before, so I'm not sure where we are in that.
Well, and okay, Commissioner McVoy? Oh, no, Commissioner,
Well, no, if you had something to say, Mayor, go ahead.
no, listen first.
Sure, you always listen first.
I was,
Go ahead.
Somebody.
no, that's okay. I don't mind listening.
Okay.
Because somebody else said it, why would I?
So I agree. I thought we were on the same pages of having a mobility study done, and we said that there was gonna be money spent and then the study done. On social media, somebody posted placards that are now next to Dave's in regards to valet parking in our ordinance. And that went on social mayhem. And I just happened to knock on that lady's door yesterday when I was passing out flyers. So instead of talking about cemeteries, I got to scream out about parking. So it is a concern and people are really concerned about where, so I recommend it, well, you can park at Church by the Glades, it's free, it's at Second and M. She's like, well, it's 2 blocks away from where I want to go.
Nothing's free.
So I also had, the fact that we have to come up with money to pay for the Bohemian parking And now people are hearing that they're gonna have to pay for metered parking. There's a little bit of backlash on that. So if we have to pay to create the parking, the public has to realize that that money's gotta be regenerated, right? There's gotta be a cost associated with creating parking. And it can't just be on our dime, on the city's dime. So I'm in full support of a mobility study. I think that if we're gonna have an advisory board, it should be coupled more with the business advisory board that we keep talking about, especially if we want to hear from merchants downtown that this affects on a regular basis. But it also affects residents who live downtown. You know, I think that we should have resident striped and resident decals for people who have on-street parking and they don't have a driveway or a garage to park in. So I'm in full support of us looking at the cost of doing the study that needs to be done and putting the action together and maybe just making it the business advisory board and having them give input on what they think is a good plan.
I guess I had just recently read the introduction to the cottages book that came out a few years ago. And had not read that and looked at the book, but not the introduction before. And I guess I would lean more toward a urban planning, architecture. And this gets to your question, who would you want to have on the board? And the connection to the cottages book is that the thing that all urban planners and architects who've ever looked at Lake Worth jump out at is our layout is very unusual for Florida and unusual for a lot of places. It's very walkable. It is the small distances. Now I understand, I hear you, Mayor, that not everybody can walk, not everybody can do those things, not everybody can bike. However, it is a very central part of the nature of our city. And so I would want to make sure that if we do I would make it a transportation board and to look at all forms of mobility, and be very creative about options. I did make some notes, which if I can get to them, you'll have. I think that we're seeing a lot, again, like some other industries, we're seeing changes in what are ways that people get around. A lot of the electric vehicles have made a big difference. So you've got electric bikes, you've got electric scooters, you've got electric skateboards, you've got all sorts of things. And even in places like New York, it's considerably bigger than us, or Manhattan, that is becoming a significant part of the traffic flow and something that we should think about. Obviously, we've all heard about self-driving cars. There's some interesting analyses out of the Strong Towns folks that think a lot about urban planning, saying, hey, you want to get out ahead of that because it can actually have kind of negative effects on, because of safety concerns, on what your downtowns look like and how the sidewalk parts interact with the roadway. So I'm all for some sort of transportation board. I'm hesitant to make it heavy on the parking side, but I'm very much in favor of thinking about a wide range of things and data on the parking side of it to really establish what we need, what we don't need. It was very sobering in our discussion of the pool to be reminded that a previous commission already committed, I believe it was $2.5 or $2 and something other $1 million for parking. We're on the hook for paying for that. And I would say before we do too much more in that direction, let's see how that works, see how it gets used, see how the finances work and so on.
Yeah, I think in the Bohemian, I don't remember it exactly, but I think, we do need, we had a desire to have parking there. Not we, the previous commission, but I think the actual amount that we spent turned out to be not a horrible amount per space. Actually, it was not a good.
The per space might be,
right,
but the total cost is not insignificant.
Right.
As we've talked about in these meetings, we seem to have an idea, I don't know if I always agree with it, that different things we do need to be self-sustaining. So as Commissioner Maleka pointed out, well, if you want parking, those are not cheap, and how are you going to do
and it's going to be paid for. So a couple of things that I just wanted to add or to talk about. And I probably have an unpopular view. I don't mind parking garages. I think that they work in certain places. So in Minneapolis has, these little tiny corners, in Washington, DC, these little tiny, it doesn't have to be a big parking garage. Or in the alternative, and I want to follow up on this. I know Ann Fairfax and I both, a couple of years ago, counted all the empty parking lots in the churches and talked about, could we not just have a church take pity on us and give us a good rate for, renting out part of their parking, like the one at your church, Clear Church of Velez, is right downtown. It's 2 blocks away. Maybe we should have a valet parking downtown to help that. Another idea is to have, because if we get a pool, we get the oceanfront park that we're looking to get, and we want to attract more people, maybe a good thing to do would be have actually like a trolley valet that you go up to you get picked up somewhere in the city and with your chairs and stuff and get brought up to the beach so that we don't have, I wouldn't even mind one little parking garage at the beach, but I know that's anathema to a lot of people. So I think we need to be creative. I said at the agenda meeting the other day, it's easy to say, well, it's only 2-block walk. Well, when you're
I
not,
understand.
it's hard. It's hard.
Or if you have a broken leg.
I listen, there are many times where it's really difficult for me to walk a couple blocks
I
and,
wasn't gonna do that. That's
yeah,
not possible.
and for out-of-town visitors, we come, somebody comes from Delray or somebody comes from wherever, they've got to have a place to park. I know that there's a big movement towards, we don't have to have cars downtown. You shouldn't use cars, but we do use cars. And that's how people get from one place to another. And if they can't come downtown and have a place to park, I think that's a problem. So I think.
Don't envision cars fully going away.
Yeah. I subscribe to Strong Towns. I read all the articles. I'm not, I try to keep myself informed on that stuff, but I think that we also have to deal with reality. So I don't know what a mobility study is. I don't know what that means. I don't know, that means, I think, talking about how does one pay for that sort of thing? If we want to have a trolley system, how do we pay for it? If we want to have a small, listen, well, somebody suggested to me years ago, a narrow track train downtown, a little small track train that goes around the city. So I think when we're getting into the details now, but I think there's consensus to have a group to look at these. Herman, you were first.
I'll hear from Kim and.
Let's hear from Kim.
Okay, so I think it's really important that we do have a strategic plan for how to move people around the city, because even if not everybody is going to get a parking space right in front of the store that they want to shop at, because somebody else might be in that parking space. So from what I've seen, a lot of things are, build the parking structures and things like on the outskirts, and then have something like the trolley, like you're also saying, to help get people that extra 2 blocks, because it's just not, unless we turn the downtown into like half parking garages, it's going to get likely where you're just not going to be able to find the perfect spot. So I think the more we can plan to get people easily from one place to another, the better, but it really means that there's all these pieces that have to work together. I'm a little nervous about, the whole chicken and the egg. Do we really want to form an advisory board to talk about transportation before we've gotten any kind of study done or any idea? Like, what are they going to talk? They are going to talk, and we're going to get 7 people. It could be all merchants. What's their background in planning that makes them experts in this area? And they're going to be, I would hate to form a board and give everybody like hopes that like big changes are going to be coming soon, when we need the time to have a very well thought out plan. So but I do think there's some things that we might want to try to address more immediately before trying to wait for this plan. So if we could kind of parse out what our immediate needs are and how to address those, I think that would be good.
And I live in, this is my bailiwick. I live and work downtown. My life is tiny. And I do see, the flow during the day and into the night. Most of the time, there's no parking problem. It's Saturday night, it's the nighttime, which to me begs the question of either get valet and rent a lot from a church, to take care of that problem. And, I live on L Street and to the Second Avenue South. And, a couple times a year when it's 4th of July or the Street Cleaning Festival, it's kind of a pain in the neck, but it's not the end of the world. It's 1 or 2 days. And we live with it. We've been living with it for 28 years. Commissioner Robinson.
Yeah, thank you. The high, I'm gonna, I've said it before, the high cost of free parking.
Well, that's one thing that we have to look at. I mean, maybe it's time to start charging.
Right. The Bahamian, the part of that money was an understanding that it was part of the financing of the project itself. And yes, per space, it costs that much. So we should be very aware that any structure downtown would cost probably more. And that project is really focused on the possibility of a train stop on those tracks. So, I know it's a lot of money, but at the time, I understood my vote to mean more than just providing parking for downtown, which I didn't believe that it was going to focus that much on. The spaces, the churches, the banks that are closed, the insurance is, if we can demonstrate that we're willing to pay for the insurance to cover.
Well, those would be the details that we'd have to work out with.
That's a basic insurance cost that we should at least understand that we're going to have to commit to. But we're going to have to commit to it. If we're going to have more stores open, eliminate empty stores, we're going to have to talk about this sooner rather than later. Mobility. The more spaces we'll provide, the more cars we're going to get downtown. The idea is to lessen traffic. The idea is to provide public transportation, and I'm going to say in the form of golf carts or 6-passenger golf cart on call, so that when your broken leg or hobbling effect, you can have them be there.
And of course, we'd have to look at the expense. I mean, I think that's a great idea. Everything we're going to talk about is going to have to look at the expense of it.
Yes, and that's where the CRA, I'm hoping, considers their future projects to consider mobility, or at least a contribution from developers to a fund for mobility, which includes parking. Lighting is another important safety factor, and an inviting. We need to make our crossing from our public parking spaces to our main streets is a lot of times not very attractive.
Which is one of the reasons I bring up valet parking at the beach, because I have spoken with Mr. Lipton a few times, and one of their problems is that people are uncomfortable going up there at night because they've got to walk down. It's very dark because of, a lot of reasons. So I think, if we're talking about mobility and valet and different things, I think we need to include as well.
So I look forward to some action on improving our walkability. And it should not focus as much on cars as you should be on.
I mean, anybody can walk in the city now. There's nothing stopping them, right?
Right. I walk to, yeah.
Commissioner Maliga.
I think it was Commissioner Stokes who said, what can we do now? There's a fix. One of the things that I know happens is that we have a lot of employees who work downtown who take up the public parking spots. We could possibly, I would hate to say the quick fix, but something that we could do in the near future is maybe getting with Church by the Glades or other churches and saying, we want to use these as designated employee parking spots. So if you work for Dave's or if you work for Rustico, they get a decal, you're an employee, you only park in the church parking lot. If you park anywhere else, you're going to get ticketed, because we need that for the people who want to come downtown.
Yep.
And especially then if we do that, A lot of times what happens is the people come out of Dave's, they come out of Rum Shack and they're bartenders and they don't get out until 3:45, 4 o'clock, and their car's been towed because our signs say you must be out of the parking lot by 3. So I think that could be a fix for both ways, is to create a downtown employee parking only spot.
Before we start a board, do you think maybe, I hate to say it, but do you think we should have a more extended conversation about parking and mobility in the city before we turn it over to a volunteer board to give them some more direction?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we discussed it. I think we have, we're gonna move forward with it at some point and hopefully in the near future. So next up is discussion E, which is regarding,
Underperforming assets,
sorry?
underperforming assets.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one is discussion regarding the development of a policy for public use of existing day docks on the city's intracoastal waterfront. And I'm gonna call on,
It's a mouthful.
because you know I am, that's why you came in. He had the good graces to share with us today.
Some extensive email.
Some extent, no, not emails, but agreements and.
I didn't get those.
And the one,
I didn't get those.
I got them, I don't know, it was in my email. It is all the old, it's a letter from 2020, and it's also the Second Amendment to the lease agreement between Palm Beach County. It has to do with Snook Islands and what we can do.
Yep, I don't have it.
So would you care to make a short presentation, Mr. Rose?
As short as possible.
All right, then I'll phrase it a different way, Mr. Rose. I know you are.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Juan Ru, as Assistant City Manager for the record. And yes, this topic has been discussed on several occasions. Last time was 2020, emails that I shared with you. And there's more, but the main one was a letter that came from Deborah Burns, who is now the Executive Director for Palm Beach County Environmental Management Resources, with the county. And if you guys recall, Snook Islands project was a collaborative effort between Palm Beach County, city, FIND, which is Florida Inland Navigation District. And, that agreement is pretty straightforward, that the capital that was raised and put together to build that facility was through the county, through FIND grants and county dollars. And then essentially the city got an operating agreement, which was attached to that email as well, to basically just oversee it. And the stickler of this conversation per se is the definition of the usage. And by definition, you can read it in the email, there's transient docks and there's docks that aren't transient. They also use the description of day use only. And the intent behind that is because FIND, when they provide funding to projects, they do it in a way where they're not catering to any special interest groups. So by renting a slip, by definition, you're giving someone special interest. By partnering with nonprofits even, you're providing special interest. So they stay away from that. So when they get involved in projects, they keep it very specific. Transient use, day use only, people come and go. There's no mooring, there's no, hourly slip rentals, there's no week or whatnot. Now what gets confusing is there are thousands of projects up and down both East Coast, West Coast of Florida. Some have FIND funds involved, some don't. But when the original permit was submitted and the grant was submitted by the county, which they were the grantee, okay, it was submitted as a transient type facility.
In and out.
Hence why there's no electric, there's no plugins, there's no pump outs. And on top of that, Snook Islands is an environmentally sensitive area, right? So we have had multiple conversations, internally and externally with the county over the years, and trying to find a way to, more than anything, minimize, some of the stubbornness that we get from passerby that take advantage of those slips. And really what that boils down to is an enforcement issue that we've been trying to, work with Captain Baird and PSO. Even Larry Lightfoot, our parking manager, has gotten involved where we've time and time again have put up the signage that references the ordinances. We've dealt with the school vandalism, as soon as signs go up, they get knocked down. So by the time a call comes in for a sailboat, PBS officer walks down and there's no ordinance, there's nothing for them. So then it becomes this perpetual frustration, where we're kind of at. But that's really the 20,000-foot elevator speech of.
Are these passerbys on foot? Or are they on boat? I guess that's where I'm confused. Are these people who are sleeping on the docks?
No, these are boats sailing through. Some people there may be examples where we've had some sailboat owners use it as a temporary
storage.
Likes to work on their boat and whatnot.
I'm gonna tell, let me just, I'll be right.
I just needed clarification, sorry.
I'm gonna bring the conversation wider. Because I think it's pretty clear that Snook Islands itself is pretty restricted as to what we can do. But there is more to Bryant Park than Snook Islands. Did we apply to try to get some funding to do a study on what we could do in terms of docks and usage, some passive usage for rentals for kayaks and things, and also perhaps put in south of Snook Islands, some piers, some docks?
Not officially yet, Madam Mayor. What we have done, for the last several years internally, we've talked about different ideas, different concepts to expand and activate the waterway a little bit more. Now, maybe with the opening of a hotel on the waterfront, these types of conversations start to tie in a little bit more synergy.
And I'd like to have, if we're talking about that in relation to the Gulf Stream, assuming all goes well, I'd like to have them, if it's a possibility that we can do docks there, I'd like to not wait for the hotel to be built to talk about it.
And we've explored that with the county staff, and Ern is very specific, and we did some preliminary studies on, where the seagrasses are and whatnot. And there is an ability to add some more, dock slips, we'll call it South Bryant,
Right.
a boat ramp. We don't have any dock slips. We basically have a dockage area for people boating, putting their boats in and out.
Right.
What we're talking about is slips.
Where we could charge,
program,
where people would have to register,
Right.
and where we'd have pump out boats coming regularly, so that it's not going into the intercoastal. I see that, to one of the utilized assets that we have, that's a waterfront that we don't use.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we haven't, we've talked about it internally, but in a public manner, about what to do with, we'll call it South Bryant, the bridge, is how do you position, when do we position that conversation? Again, we're talking about the beach and limited resources and whatnot. There are dollars out there to do things. Fines have millions of dollars that they fund the county, but a lot of it's matching dollars, right? Usually it's one for one, it's fine. So, we as an example, a couple of years ago, we talked about building a boat dock system behind the golf course restaurant. So you could come by boat to the restaurant.
A little close to Snook Islands,
Well,
but we can move it north.
We got some preliminary, conceptually it was doable, and we've had the county involved along the way. But it was $1 million project. At the time, we didn't have $500,000 to go to find with a project to match.
Which again is the shovel-ready conversation when these things come up.
Right. So
Never get anything.
what I would do is encourage you as a body, if looking at opportunities in South Bryant Park for the future, is when it comes time to talk about your capital 5-year plan, your strategic plan. That's the time to really bring these big conversations up and then kind of see where it positions in the timeline.
But didn't we ask for money for a study?
We haven't asked for money for a study. What we want to do is ask for money for a study to master plan all of Bryant Park,
Right.
the golf course and
I
whatnot.
thought we had done that through Pinsky.
We don't have $500,000 for that.
Let me get back to you. I know what
Yeah.
you're to, Madam Mayor, and I don't want to get the water improvement projects we submitted to the House
Okay.
confused with
Okay.
grants, because Mr. Shields has different pots in different places. But before I say no, I'll verify with you, but we have talked about, the first step would be to master plan the golf
Yeah,
course.
find out what we
And
can
then
do.
how it ties in with Snook Islands and then North Bryant, Middle Bryant, South Bryant. You gotta kind of look at everything holistically and not just bite-sized pieces.
Right.
Do we know how much the funds were that we received from Find on the current docks?
We did it with the county, and if I remember, Commissioner, you remember, I think you were in office back then. It might have been like a $5 million project.
It was not cheap.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap. And then part of our conversation with Find through this inquiry, a couple of years back, was that one of the options that we could have was the city pay back Find.
That's why I was asking the question.
And it's in the several $100,000 was their portion. And then the other step would be to convince the county to come forward to Find, and they submit essentially a grant change, GAN, we call it, right?
Yeah.
And ask for those docks to now be considered non-transient. But then at that point, they would be forfeiting the fine contribution to the project.
And what would the benefit be if we did do that? I guess because I have a bunch of sailors sitting here, so I'd like to know, what is the benefit if we do decide to not make them transient?
Can you ask that again?
What would be the benefit to having them not be transient and to paying back the fine funds? If you've already been down that wheelhouse, obviously there was a benefit to that.
Well, there was obviously the upfront cost of the payback. But then there was the cost to implement the infrastructure to govern that program. Lake Park comes to mind. Lake Park has a beautiful
arena,
right, run by the municipality. But there's a cost to run that infrastructure. So at the time, based on the number of slips that we have available, we would probably more than likely end up losing dollars.
Okay.
By the time you fund the number of FTEs, improving the security. And if you're going to charge someone just for a wet slip, you're going to get X dollars based on the market. But if you're going to charge for a slip that has power hookup and other things, which those are infrastructures that we don't currently have.
Okay, thank you.
In all honesty, the taxi was a real impetus for these docks. Is that correct?
A water taxi?
Taxi.
You're aging me now, Commissioner.
Well, they wouldn't have built these, for day docks without somebody's grand idea of a water taxi on the intercoast.
We don't have.
So I think it's.
I remember that.
You could be right, but I will.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm right. And I'm going to say it's a little disingenuous for the people above us to say that they're not interested in any other entities. But they were certainly interested in investing in day docks for water taxi, somebody's idea. So that kind of BS is really annoying when we sit with absolutely unproductive amenities for our community, and they don't want to talk to us. They don't want to talk to us because the commission hasn't decided that we should talk to them. It's a failed project, and obviously it's a failure as is. And it's a failure on their part. It's a failure on our part if we don't insist that it be used to our advantage. So I don't like continuing a failed project, if we want to call it.
That was the original, I can't, if that was the original agreement, then it's not a failure. The failure was then in the.
Oh, it's certainly it's not a failure if we continue to fail, on their part.
No, Herman, all I'm saying is, and I wasn't here when this agreement was reached, and it's quite lengthy and lots of paper. If the original agreement was unfair to us, then that's when the failure occurred, not afterwards. That whatever that agreement came to, for whatever reason, it came the way it came.
Is there language in the agreement that says that there was a water taxi part of the agreement?
You can read it right here, I don't know.
Yeah, that was the next step. So, they weren't going to get funding for a pie in the sky until, they had the oven go.
Crust in the pan.
To be honest, if you remember, if you recall back, we've all been here a long time in the community. What used to be there was the old concrete, half the bridge, right? And
That's right.
I wasn't in a position to be involved in that level of those conversations then, but thinking back, there was a desire to get rid of that.
It was a huge liability. It was so dangerous.
That invited the ability, and at the time, the county, their Parks and Rec department, were always looking to expand recreational leisure opportunities on the county. They look at things from a county perspective. So anytime we partner with them, i.e. the beach, there's always strings. You can't differentiate between county and residents on rates or whatnot. We have plenty of examples where we partnered with them. And this is one of those classic cases where, we got an improvement to a facility that had kayak launch, that had an environmental piece to it. And then it, snowballed and, I think the Snook Islands came first and the docks came later. And yeah, maybe there were conversations about activating the middle part. I call it the central part of the ICW, because you got to go pretty far north and pretty far south to experience any kind of commercial activity as a boater. I know every inch of the waterway, so there is a huge gap. So maybe, the intent was, but again, the formal agreement that we have to govern by is pretty straightforward, black and white.
Unless we talk to them for a compromise or, and we can't know what possibilities are until we talk to them.
Yeah.
The tourism, we're going to get a report next meeting about tourism. This is such an underperforming asset that it's embarrassing to have another derelict structure of any kind in our community. We need to talk to them and see what they're amenable to. But if we don't, if they won't listen to one person unauthorized to talk to them.
Madam Mayor, let me
I know.
just want to be clear that I'm not, representing Carmen and I here, administration, not discouraging us or discouraging the idea of trying to find a better way. There has been some turnover at the county. Mrs. Burns has been there, maybe a year or two now. Carmen Bayer, who we worked with a lot, you remember Carmen, he's done retired. If there's consensus to go explore, some change or a conversation, I'd be more than happy to do that. Fine draws your line in the sand. So the conversation, if there's consensus to do something, would be us engaging the county on some level, but again, fine is a partner at the table in a major way, and that's a hurdle, regardless of what the county says, that has to be overcome.
It's a failure on their part too. I mean, I don't want to see them fail.
Yeah, I'm not.
I very much appreciate what they've done so far, but it hasn't worked. It's not working now. I want it to work.
That's not working.
But yeah, what I would like before we do spend a lot of staff time.
Yeah.
Coordinating with the county is for us to understand what we would like to see there, because just going, I don't know how, if you were to leave tomorrow to go to the county, if you feel equipped to know what to ask for from them right now, because I don't really feel equipped to know. So we're saying that it's a failure now because of day docs and how they're being used. So what is it that we're asking the county to let us do? What is it that you want to see there, Commissioner Robinson?
Let us come to a consensus of how we want to use it. And if we can't come to a consensus, don't know what we're going to do with it, nothing's changed. But at least they'll give us the permission to be creative in our own right for our own community. We're not asking them to do anything except let us come up with an idea and then we'll come back to them.
Well, we can always come up with an idea and take it to them. I mean, we have no idea. I think what Kim is saying is that's an idea.
This is the first time we've talked about this in a long time.
Yeah.
On the dais.
Oh,
I'd like to hear from the community.
We have two comment cards. Wait, did you want to say that?
I was just going to say that I think a lot of us are not up here, are not all that familiar with either the problems that are there or the potential that people see for it.
We create problems.
And maybe maybe it'll come from the comments will help us with that. I suspect it will, but it might be helpful. I have no problem with, Juan communicating with Find and see what option. But I think it would help us before we encourage him to go out. Okay, we don't like that there are boats that are there overnight for multiple days. I understand that's one of the issues, and they're not supposed to be, and PDSO is supposed to enforce that as our enforcement arm. And I don't know what the difficulties are in doing so, but it apparently doesn't work. So that's one that we don't like. And the other, I guess, is that we would like to have more marina-ish type usage of it. I don't know if it would be more slips, but at least more services, electric and pump out and water.
I gotta say, when I go across the bridge, and I do at least twice a day, when I see a bunch of sailboats out there, it looks like, oh, right, that's the way this is supposed to work. We're supposed to have sailboats on the water.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's, okay.
And we don't necessarily know, but I see the same thing, and I don't know whether he's been there a day or whether he's been there a week.
It's not fair.
Keep a picture of it.
My dad was a sailor and rented a space in the Annapolis Eagle Alley and did day tours. There's opportunities out there. Herman, real quick, I want to get to public comment. Do you have anything else to say?
Just that the Find has created the same thing that CRA has created downtown. And a problem.
Okay, thank you.
That we need to fix.
Okay, Ted Johnson. You're up.
Johnson 802 South Palmway and Commodore of the Freeport Sailing Club.
All right.
Thank you. The docks have turned into a real slum. We've had 2 serious arrests down there, a lot of thievery, and Mr. Liz referred to sailors. There's sailors that 4 of the boats don't have masts. They're hardly sailors.
I mean, there are sailboats without masks?
Right.
Oh.
And they've been
So
several
much harder to sail.
without power. They have no more.
They just sit there. Now, are you talking about I don't mean to interrupt, the docks just north of, what they put in for the kayaks north of the bridge?
Dock, right. We have 6 slips left, I think. And the shame of it is for our city, and yes, there were water taxes supposed to be a part of that project, but it turned out we had a member of the club who tried to run a water taxi, and the economics of it aren't good because of the distance between us and West Palm on the one hand and Boynton on the other. And the other part of it was that each city, to be part of that route, wanted permits from the water taxi operator, and we didn't have any permitting process. So it came to a screeching halt. But Herman makes an interesting point, Mr. Robinson, that at the time that the docks were put in place and the project was designed, a private operator was going to take possession of the dock. So Find is on shaky ground in terms of not allowing any kind of private use. According to a study that was done a few years back, 25,000 boats go up and down the Invocation every year. And that's an old number. I think it's greater now. And if you stand out on the waterfront, you can see that happen. And our dock has never, since I've been here, has never.
Let's give them a minute or two.
Yeah.
Okay, there's not a lot of
We're learning
comment.
things here.
Thank you.
Very informative.
There's never been a sign that says Lakewood Visitor Dock welcome.
Right.
And so these 25,000 boats going up and down have no knowledge that we have a visitor dock. And I've been a cruiser, and to find a place that I can dock during the day and go to a grocery store, a restaurant, and gift shops, and it's rare that any city has a facility like ours. And we don't we hide the fact, we have all that our docs say is no overnights.
Right.
And that's crazy. So we had a project, we had a proposal that we made to the city. And I know it's late, I won't take much more time, but we were going to, in exchange for having a boat there, which we run free trips for residents, and act as a visitor center with pamphlets and so forth. We did this, and a big banner that said, "Welcome to the Port." We were doing all that, but we got kicked off the dock anyway. We felt like we were on the way to managing that resource and improving it using volunteers. And the city ended up rejecting our efforts. And I think we have a different management of the city now, and we have a different commission. And I'm hoping that we can go forward on that. I'd like to see, it's a vacuum now. It attracts the very worst
Right.
of the people that occupy the docks. And it's a vacuum because we're not even making any effort to use it the way it was intended. And I'd like to see us, and we're ready and able to help if we could just get some.
Well, let's find out why, let's find out how you can. And let's find out how you can and with what we're allowed to do. And, you know, I just have to make a comment. It is so in keeping with Lake Worth to have a wonderful asset and not let people know about it. Using, for example, the pool. Using for an example today, the fact that we have wonderful restaurants and a store up at the beach and you wouldn't know it if you drove past.
Right.
We don't have no
signs.
No signage. So I hear you. And I hope that we can, as a commission and with our staff, find out what we are allowed to let you do.
Okay.
And take it from there.
All right, much more to be said, but I don't want to take up.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have more conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua Diaz.
So Joshua Diaz, 110 North F Street, the artist officer over here. I had recently moved a boat up from Miami, and I want to be, one to say those docks are a gift. They're wonderful for someone on the water to be able to come in just for the day, as everything's been stated earlier. Our problem is not transients. Our problem is not those migrating or cruising. Our problem is the squatters. I've kept my boat there for a couple of years now.
In the water?
In the water, and sorry, not on the dock, in the water. I've got to know the
anchored, right?
Anchored, yes, anchored well. Teaching the other
the best way, right?
Correctly. I'm a fan of the rules, and if I'm an advocate for the other sailors out there that if we obey the rules, we keep the dock. This is a gift. Now I've come to know a lot of them by name, the squatters. And learning some of their own excuses. There's grander potential that for these docks, but if I can just give some insight ideas of what we can do to just solve some of the problem would be they complain that there's not a space for dinghies to be there.
For what?
Dinghies.
Dinghies.
Oh, dinghies. Okay.
If there was one space that was allowed dinghy dockage, it would encourage them to stay off the dock.
Right.
Right. Which most places do have that. You should be able to make landfall somewhere. Another is it's hard to enforce. I mean, I know I'm really glad the sheriff's here as well. I know he's done some work on the dock as well. It's hard to enforce and continue to enforce and fine and get salvage companies to come tow the boat off, all this stuff. However, I don't want us to underestimate the power of being a nuisance back to them. Those orange stickers that we put on the boat, those are a nuisance. You get one of those on, it takes you a week to get off.
Oh.
Those are continued to be put on.
Oh.
Not only eventually flags a whole boat with
plastered.
Yeah, and we know exactly who needs to be towed off then. I'm sure the ones that do live on the boat that are squatting will leave after two are put on the boat, three are put on. I just wanted to offer that as a potential.
Yeah, that's
Do you know these guys?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. we're buds.
The big sailor crowd.
I totally for everything. And I think that, it really is a gift, that dock is a gift, and if we can find a way to enforce the rules with, I mean, it's been a lot of effort, but there might be ways that I didn't want us to underestimate
The power.
just the power of being a nuisance back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Madam Clerk, do you have any public comments?
I do not, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So,
Madam Mayor, if I may, real quick.
please.
Let me just address a couple of things, and I love the Admiral. And we actually had many conversations leading up to, the decision essentially not to do anything. And the emails that I provided you guys from Janet Zimmerman, who was the Assistant Executive Director with Find, was from a conversation when I presented the idea behind partnering with the sailing club and then doing the visitor dock. These aren't new concepts. These are things that we shopped hard and tried to find a way. And that's what generated, essentially the response, just pay us our money back and we'll get out of the way, and then turn and partner with the county. So I don't want to create any unnecessary expectations that something's going to change.
Unless we pay them.
But we just have to operate with that assumption. I can go back, and I haven't talked to Janet in 2 years. I can catch up with her and say we're back to where we were before. And like I said, the only thing, other thing that's changed is there's different people at the county at Earn. So, but
It may have mellowed a bit.
the sailing club, those guys, we spent, quite a few meetings talking with them. And to have to disappoint them after all of that, I hate to have to, we end up in the same conclusion.
And I feel like we're spinning some wheel that
We're literally spinning in place and on the water. And then the gentleman, he's 100% correct. One of our faults, it's a fault, it's just reality, is the inability to keep up with a facility that doesn't close. In theory, it's 24 hours, 7 days. And as you guys know, with PBSO running calls, from a leisure services standpoint, we don't have, park rangers, that typically would be used to provide oversight and enforcement that layers over PBSO. So, the orange stickers, we do plaster them when we can, but when an officer walks down, if the sign that notices the ordinance is floating in the water or completely missing, which has been replaced, Lord knows how many times.
Can we put it on the bridge somewhere so it can't be taken down?
They knock everything out. They take it all out. It is what it is. But he's right. Those are squatters. I wasn't using exact correct definitions, not to insult anyone, but the issues aren't people with good intentions. It's people looking for a place to, and it's very difficult to get a vessel removed. It's a long
It's
process.
horrible.
You guys want to buy a boat?
And then they
like
start to
Marine Patrol.
sink, then they start to sink in the intercoastal.
So I just want to be clear, on expectations in the community, because this is a boating community, boater, and it's difficult looking at, having a sense that our hands are tied sometimes.
Yeah, I want to find a way to get those, somehow use that Bryant Park, that water, that amazing asset that we have, even if it's not Snook Islands, maybe we'll talk about it, but we were doing something about looking at the possibility of docks south of the current.
Yeah, I want to say we even talked about, we explored the idea of moving those docks from away from Snook Islands and adding them to the Bryant Park boat ramps now.
Right. You and I have talked about that as a possibility, because I think, again, if we had docks with, that were manned, that they paid for, why not? We're on the water. It doesn't, and then, again, funding it, but we wouldn't have to deal with the county. Commissioner McVoy, real quick. We're all good, real quick. We're getting to the.
Well, I get frustrated when I hear, we just can't do that.
Right.
And I get frustrated when PBSO is who we contract with for enforcement. And they're obviously not enforcing. And in other situations, that would be a breach of contract. You're not performing what we're paying you for. And so I have fairly limited patience with the statement that, you know, to hear that these are squatters, these are people who don't belong there, that it's clear from any number of different, whether it's the county or fined or us, they're not supposed to be there overnight. We have an enforcement arm. We have a suggestion that plaster this up with orange stickers. That doesn't strike me as a real big hurdle to get over. Let's friggin' do it. And I mean, it's a nice idea to ask, could we have some more docks? If I was anybody, fined or anybody else at the county, I'd say, you guys can't even manage the ones you got. Why am I gonna give you more of them? And to me, I wanna hear, this doesn't strike me, this is not like sending a guy to the moon and getting him back in one piece, you know, live and breathing and all that stuff. This is relatively straightforward. The ideas of having a sailing club to do something with kids, again, doesn't strike me as an impossible hurdle that you know, there's just no way we can do it. So I'm looking for solutions to make this work better.
I agree with you. Commissioner Malinga.
So I wrote down over here, PBSO Marine, they have a Marine unit.
Right.
So why can't we work with PBSO Marine to be part of the patrol? I mean, we have helicopters and we have dogs and we have four-wheelers and we have motorcycles and we've got horses and I mean, let's add the boat to the mix, right? I do know that those orange stickers are a pain in the butt because my landlord at the zoo gym has them this big and he will plaster people's cars that don't have a zoo gym parking decal in their window. And when they park at Victoria's or when they park at Okra, trust me, we get the phone calls the next day. Why did you do that? I'm like, no, it wasn't me, it was the landlord. And when you see one of those on your Bentley, you get really upset. So I do know that people hate those stickers. I don't know if it's the most effective way. I too love the idea of if we have this amazing sail club and volunteers, people that want to do great things. I mean, I would hope to God it doesn't cost us whatever, $3 million to get out of this agreement that somebody else got us into. But I have the fullest confidence that if anybody could do it, Mr. Juan Ruiz, and has a relationship with the county and who's a boater. I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy fix, but at least we can try to re-explain, you know, re-explore avenues, you know.
And this is infrastructure, this is outside activities, this might be a little chunk of ARPA funds, which is a discussion we're going to have at some point. Herman.
Well, I just look forward to appealing to find and earn to their generosity and understanding that they've diminished in value. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on enforcement of a bad policy. What we should be doing is changing a bad policy and to use them to compromise. If we leave 3 docks for day trippers and have responsibility and income from our underperforming asset, I would hope we do so.
What if the sail club was part of the rec department? Is that?
Trust me, I don't want to.
Damn, okay.
There's very few ideas that we didn't explore in agreements that involve kids programming in summer camps and exposing kids to sailing, and we were ready to buy a bunch of sailboats. I mean, trust me, we didn't
I do
spend
trust
4
you.
years talking about this
I
for no
do.
reason.
I do trust you.
So, what about, you want to take this one?
I'll get out there. I'm gonna get out there on my paddleboard and just start taking those stickers up and down the intercoastal and just be slapping them.
If there's one thing that our staff do is we try to do, you know, sometimes we run into walls that we didn't.
At 80 miles an hour.
Right, so, you know, but again, we're, like I said, we're playing within the lines that are before us. Doesn't mean that lines can't be adjusted.
But that's only with Cook Islands in the county. I mean, there's a lot of park that has nothing to do with it. I keep pushing you south.
I know you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
The group's got to go with you south.
Well, come on, kids, let's go south.
based on the discussion that I heard among the dais and the consensus of the concern of the limitations that's being mentioned from the county, I like the suggestion that Juan mentioned about, well, it was several years since conversation was had, fine. Why don't we at least make a phone call or make a contact to say, listen, we're thinking about possibilities and, you know, how can we work within the confines of the restrictions? Sometimes there's creativity in between the fine line. So let's just at least do a.
And time goes by, people, like you said, staff has changed. They're used docs now. They're not new.
That's right. We could argue they've been evaluated by ours.
So if you want to feel out the county, I think that's great and see kind of where they're at right now. I am curious about any kind of way to advertise, like the Commodore said, it's like, hey, we have come visit Lake Worth. Like, is there other ways that we can try to get these to be used by for their intended use? So I'm curious about that. And then also the suggestion of the dinghies being able to meet to dock somewhere. Can you explain how hard that is to make happen, or?
I'll have to explore it, honestly, Commissioner Stokes. I wasn't aware of the whole dinghy conversation.
Yeah, because a friend of mine has a boat and she takes her paddleboard out. And then she brings her paddleboard back and has to drive off with the paddleboard. So then if we did have a way to store dinghies and make it a secure place for them to do that, then we could have more anchorage rather than as a temporary fix. Yeah,
Most cruisers, that's the way to do it in the rest of the world.
right.
They don't like being,
Exactly.
but they need a safe place.
Right.
PBSO will take will take the dinghy as well as.
Well, I mean, then that's an issue. Then we need to.
And so PBSO clearly is showing they can do something,
Right.
but they're not doing the thing that we need them to do.
Gosh darn it.
I don't know. That to me is very
Well,
frustrating. One thought
Okay.
to do it in a different way. What if, I don't know whether the whole commission could go or a subset of the commission reach out to find and say, look, we have de facto private use happening right now. That is a real problem to the city and problem to maximum benefit of this thing. Couldn't we have some better private use? And couldn't you, as the city manager said, couldn't you find a creative way to help us make that happen?
I would be happy as mayor to go with one.
I would be happy to encourage that.
I would,
And volunteer if you want, but I'm not the best person.
Go forth.
my advice would
Yeah,
be,
I don't mind. That's kind of a.
my advice would be to engage fine first. We need the county to
Right.
agree to at least consider amending the interlocal.
Mhm.
And then together with the county vote of confidence or vote of approval,
Right.
then engage fine. And then through that process, which she's laid out in an email, and I'll forward another one tomorrow, I found another one. Essentially, because of the county being the grantee, they got to go through a grant change, essentially. She didn't say they would deny it, it just, here's the hurdles you got to go through, including the monetary payback. But again, at the time when this conversation was brought forward, there wasn't consensus to move forward. Then the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
You look at the emos 2020.
Yeah, right.
So, we can most certainly go back. I can talk to Eric Call. I can talk to
Virginia.
I can.
I've got getting a meeting set up with the mayor of Palm Beach County.
But again, I just want to make sure we're cautious about creating expectations in the community, and then social media takes off. And then 6 months later, we come back and it's bad news again. So.
But at least we're giving,
Media.
at least we're giving it our gallant effort.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying.
If it's your.
And if like I said, if Snook Islands isn't the answer, then maybe a secured dinghy storage that we could do ourselves would be the answer.
It could just be one of the slips.
Right, that's what I mean, yeah.
When Palm Beach Boat Show happens in March, we're gonna get double the squad.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's been happening.
Yeah. Okay, well,
We don't want.
West Palm Beach has beautiful day docks. I use personally all the time.
Yeah.
They're staffed.
I mean, again, we don't advertise. People don't know that there's a little downtown next to that bridge. So we have talked about this for a very long time.
Yes.
Juan, I think you and Ahmed is for task us with going forward with this. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Doesn't mind. Do we have?
Motion to adjourn.
Virginia?
We have a.
Yeah, the city attorney's report.
Sorry.
Wait, we're on it.
Sorry,
I
Christie.
have to request an attorney-client session.
Oh, right.
So I'm gonna read my little script.
Right.
The city attorney desires advice from the Lake Worth Beach City Commission concerning pending litigation, specifically regarding settlement negotiations and strategy related to litigation expenditures in the case of the city of Lake Worth, Beach, Florida versus the Federal Emergency Management Agency Administrative Appeal of Disaster Assistance Decision dated December 28, 2021 for Hurricane Francis, Jean, and Wilma, and is requesting an attorney-client session to be scheduled for February 15, 2022 at 5 p.m. The estimated length of the attorney-client session will be approximately 45 minutes. The session will be attended by the members of the City Commission, Mayor Betty Rash, Vice Mayor Herman Robinson, and Commissioner Sarah Maliga, Christopher McBoy, and Kimberly Stokes. City Manager Carmen Davis, City Attorney Glenn J. Torsivia, and outside counsel Lenny Abbott, Wendy Ellard, and Michelle Saltzman. The certified court reporter will be present to ensure this session is fully transcribed, and the transcript will be made public at the conclusion of the both cited ongoing litigation.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to allow this to happen? Do I need a motion?
You don't need a motion.
All right, then,
We've coordinated on the.
we're all set. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome.
City managers report? You got nothing to report? All right, so motion to adjourn.
First, yes. Yay.
I think Commissioner Stokes made the motion,
Oh, I'll second it.
and then somebody seconded it. Commissioner Legas seconded it.
Second, good.